Okay, you're all set.
Very good. Let's go on the record and let the record reflect it's September 15, 2020, and the Board of Building Appeals is convened to consider our docket today. And the first case on our docket is an 830 matter. It's an elevator division matter. It's case number 20-0093, and it deals with the BASF Corp. Located in Cincinnati, and the elevator division's adjudication number is noted on the docket. Is there anyone here that is attending and would like to appear on behalf of the appellant? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Shade, would you enter your appearance for the elevator division?
Yes. To begin with, I'm sitting in for Mr. Updike today. He is off on vacation, so I'll be sitting in for him. For the BASF Corporation, the elevator installers.
Hold on, Mr. Shade. I need you to enter your appearance, and I'm going to have to swear you in.
Okay.
So enter your appearance, so we have it on the record. That means state your name for the record, so that we have that on the record.
I'm sorry. My name's Chris Shade.
Thank you. And would you stand, raise your right hand, and would our court reporter administer an oath?
Okay. Mr. Shade, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Shade, you have the floor.
And Mr. Snyder, if we could have Mr. Shade repeat what his position is as well too. We know who he is, but I think for the record, we need to know what his position is. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. My name is Chris Shade. I am a Southwest Elevator Inspector Supervisor for the state, filling in for Mr. Updike.
Okay. We'll hear from you.
Okay. What I have is the BASF Corporation. The elevator installers are requesting a variance for the location of the in-car operating panel and the Phase 2 firefighters operation panel. Both panels are to be located inside the car on the main egress side of the elevator. If there are front and rear openings, the elevator is a 4-stop, 10,000-pound freight in a factory type setting. No objections to the conditions, and I also have a report from the local fire department that says they're also good with the current location of the Phase 2 fire panel.
Questions of Mr. Shade?
Yeah, Mr. Shade, if you will, do you have any idea how they got installed in the wrong spot to begin with?
They, I think what it is there's a front and rear landing on this unit, and when they did this, there's a one rear floor and a 3 front floor, and when they did this, I think they had put it on the wrong end. They put it on the front side instead of the rear side. In all truth, though, as far as the fire department and everybody else goes, you know, as far as them even using the Phase 2, using the fire service portion of the panel in this type of facility, it won't be used. I see no reason, because the biggest thing is typically when you go into one, when you recall it back down, you would walk in it and the operating panel would be there on your right. Well, on this particular unit, it's going to be at the other end on the left. I mean, you'll still be able to see it. It's just not right adjacent to it.
Okay.
It was a scratch and dent elevator.
Yeah, they kind of, yeah. It's,
Is this shown in the sketch that you sent along?
the drawings I looked at, show it installed where it is.
I mean, which one of those is it? Is it the plan view of the machine room or the plan view of the hoistway?
It's the actual plan view of the car itself. You have the one of the.
There's just one drawing that shows hoistway and the machine room.
Because it wouldn't be on there. It would be on the. It would be on the car, it would be on the actual car drawings.
Oh, okay, no wonder I couldn't figure it out.
Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, I see no, I don't see this causing a problem. And the only ones that would ever need to know, if I walk the fire department in there, I know they wouldn't be able to tell me where it's supposed to be. They just look for it if needed. And like with this, that's why I had them, I was part of this one, and that's why I had them from St. Bernard Fire Department give us the letter from them stating that they were aware of it and they were okay with the location of that phase 2 fire panel.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions of Mr. Shade? And if not, what's the comfort level with the 4 members of the board?
I'm fine with it.
I would support a variance.
Okay. Brad, you're muted. Brad's muted.
Okay, yeah, if the fire department's okay with it, I'm okay with it.
Okay, that being the case, I'm fine with it as well. I would entertain a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0093. The appellant is BASF Corporation for the premises BC Cincinnati BASF Corp. at 4900 SD Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio 45232. The appellee is Charles Updike, Chief Elevator Inspector for the state of Ohio, and adjudication order number E2020-66803. I move to grant the variance, noting the no objection of the Chief Elevator Inspector and the Chief Fire Official.
Okay, that motion's been duly made. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair. Chip Welch.
Thank you. Motion's been made, motion's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Mr. Schroeder, the variance is granted on a 4-0 vote. Thank you very much. That would conclude that case, and I would move on to our next elevator case, which is case number 20-0096. Deals with premises located at Sems Tower in East Lime Loadout, 755 Lime Road, Woodville, Ohio. There are 2 elevator adjudication numbers that are noted on the docket. I also know from Ms. Steer that Tyler Schroeder from Martin Marietta is appearing on behalf of the appellant, but is doing so by telephone. And we have Mr. Shade here as well. That having been said, the case is now called. Mr. Schroeder, would you enter your appearance?
And Susan, we might need to let people know how to unmute themselves if they're on the phone.
I did. He's unmuted. He can speak.
Okay.
Sorry, I was double muted. I muted myself and didn't hit *6. This is Tyler Schrader with Martin Marietta.
Okay, and I do have on our docket list of is Tim Tawney appearing today or not?
Tim will not be joining today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schrader. And Mr. Shade, would you enter your appearance?
Yep. There's Shade.
Okay, Southwest Inspector for the Elevator Division, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we try to get that on the record. Each case is a separate record. If each of you would stand and raise your right hand, and Susie, would you administer the oath?
Yes. Okay. Do each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, I do.
Okay, Mr. Schrader, since you're representing the appellant, you have the floor at this point in time, unless you want to defer to the Elevator Division.
I'll defer to Chris Shea.
Okay. This is Chris Shade speaking now.
Yes.
For this particular one here, actually for both of these variances, it's the same, they're asking for the same thing. Due to the corrosive atmosphere of the mining environment, the owner is seeking a variance not to install phase 1 emergency operations, telephone monitoring, and audible alarm bells. Both units are exposed to outside elements, including excessive noise. This is common in steel mills, mining, and power plants. I have no objections with the conditions. The owner provided procedures for passengers to verify 2 communication means before operating the lift. Procedures shall be posted inside the lift.
Let me ask my colleagues. We've got 2 adjudications, but we have 1 proceeding. Do we have to consider each separately and deliberate separately, or can we just grant 1 variance? Should we go that route?
Well, technically, we don't have 2 case numbers.
Right.
We usually have a case number assigned to each adjudication order.
Right.
But, I mean, I'm indifferent. I mean, it's the same structure, the same everything.
Is it the same location?
Yes,
Same
sir.
plan? Oh, okay.
Paul, you have any thoughts?
So there's just different elevator numbers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
Mr. Shea, why don't you enlighten us here? Because we normally, when we have 2 adjudications, we have 2 case numbers.
Yes, we do have 2 units, same facility, same type of unit. I mean, the same everything here.
If we were to grant a variance by 1 motion in 1 deliberation to this case number, Susan, would that apply then to both adjudications?
Yes, we have had this in the past.
Okay.
Both elevators are at the same location. The issues are identical. That's why it's put under 1 case number.
Okay, I think we can take that on high then. All right, comments or questions of either Mr. Schrader or Mr. Shea by members of the board?
No, I mean, I support the variance with the signage requested by Mr. Updike.
I do have a question. I mean, the conditions are, hey, the owner has to explain to people riding the lift what the 2-way communication is with the signage on that. How is 2-way communication provided? I mean, other than us telling them that they need to tell people how to do it, I would like to know what those means are.
Sure, I can. This is Tyler Schrader. I can speak to that. So we've got procedures in place and signage saying prior to operating this lift, passenger must use the phone to confirm it dials the control room. And then it goes straight to our 24/7, 365 manned control room.
Okay, so before the lift will work, someone using the elevator has to call.
The procedure is that, yes, they would dial before operating the lift. That's not to say they couldn't violate that written procedure, but yes, they are instructed to phone and then operate.
And this is Chris Shade again. They're also required to carry radios on their person.
Correct.
That's plant policy. That's
plant
further.
policy. That's right, and that's not a condition of a variance.
Correct.
So there's a phone in the elevator that they use?
I think it's at the
Yes.
ground floor. Oh, it's in the elevator, or is it at the ground level?
It is in the elevator. Both elevators have them in the cab.
So if the elevator malfunctions and they get stuck somewhere up above, they can use the phone and call?
That
Yes,
is
sir.
correct.
Is this something that the fire department will use ever? something like this?
No, it shouldn't be. I don't know why they would operate that, I guess.
Okay, gentlemen, sentiments?
Again, I'm fine with variance.
Brad and Paul?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, this is, I would assume this is mostly used by workers who are used to operating this lift. It looks to me more like a permanent buck hoist than it does an elevator, so.
Mr. Schrader, are you comfortable with the condition of signage?
Was that, I'm sorry, this is Tyler Schrader. Was that,
Are you comfortable with the proposed condition that would be?
yes, and to speak to the prior comment, the assumption is correct. These elevators, in fact, will strictly only be utilized by plant employees.
Okay, and Brad, what's your comfort level?
Yeah, it's the general public is not using it, and since it's only used by plant employees, there's a phone in there. I guess I don't see a really anything that would be contrary to public interest to allow it, so I'd be in favor of it.
So before I'd entertain a motion, Paul, do you want to, have you parsed the language of that condition, or are we going to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm in process of rewriting it to be a little bit more understandable.
I figured that was the case. Susie, we'll go off the record for just a second.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Snyder, let me give this a shot here.
Okay, Susie, back on the record, please.
Okay.
This would be a proposed condition. This variance is conditioned upon passengers shall verify two-way communication with the plant central control room prior to operating the lift according to posted procedures and to the satisfaction of the chief elevator inspector.
Okay, Mr. Schrader and Mr. Shade, as phrased by Mr. Began, is that acceptable to each?
Chris Shade says yes.
Tyler Schrader says yes.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
You want me to make the motion, Paul?
That's all right, because I had to copy down both of those adjudication orders as well too, so it's not as simple and straightforward. For Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0096, the appellant is Martin Marietta Magnesia Specialties for the premises CEMS Towers and East Lime Loadout at 755 Lime Road, Woodville, Ohio 43469. The appellee is Charles Updike, Chief Elevator Inspector for the state of Ohio, and adjudication orders number E2020-66787 and E2020-66845. I move that the variance be granted for both adjudication orders, subject to the condition previously read in the record, and again noting the no objection of the chief elevator inspector.
Okay, motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair, Chip Welch.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries on a 4-0 basis with that condition. Thank you very much, and that concludes that case, and we'll move to our last elevator division case, which is case number 20-0101, dealing with the Bayview Villas, Building 5 in Marblehead, and the division adjudication number is noted on our docket. Do we have anyone appearing? Is Garrett Gable appearing? Are you present?
I don't believe he is.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't sound like that. Okay, well, case is called, as is the case with many elevator cases, the appellant does not attend. Mr. Shade, would you enter your appearance and state your title with the division?
Yes, Chris Shade. I'm the Southwest Elevator Inspector Supervisor, sitting in on behalf of Chip Updike, Chief Elevator Inspector.
I probably could have kept you just sworn in, but since we close out each case and call a new one, I'll ask you to stand again, and Susie, I'd ask you to administer an oath.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Shade, as before, you have the floor.
Okay. Yes, this is for the Bayview Villas. The owner is seeking a variance for a building project to exceed 14 feet of travel with an enclosed vertical platform lift. The A18 2014 2.7 restricts the total travel of a fully enclosed platform lift not to exceed 14 feet. The installation proposed for a fully enclosed vertical platform lift with a current travel of 18 feet. Project location has 3 other buildings with similar installs and approved variances. I have no objections to these provisions.
Any proposed condition or conditions?
No.
Okay. Questions of Mr. Shade or comments?
I believe we've seen 3 or 4 other elevators in this location, and I do believe we have granted a variance for each of them.
Yes, sir.
And I think our absent board member is familiar with the property, if I remember from some of the past cases, but
Yes.
yes. Okay, well, if the comfort level's there, I'll entertain a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0101, the appellant is Legends Construction for the premises Bayview Villas Building 5 at 2612 South Waterside Court. That's in Lakeside, Marblehead, Ohio, 43440. The appellee is Charles Updike, Chief Elevator Inspector for the state of Ohio, and adjudication order number E2020-66893. I move to grant the variance, noting the no objection of the Chief Elevator Inspector.
Okay, that motion is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair. Chip Welch.
Motion's been made, motion's been seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Variance is granted 4-0 on that, without any condition. Thank you very much, Mr. Shade.
Thank you.
I think you get to carry on the rest of your day, and it's 8:57. So there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to appreciate your time. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Susan, do we have the parties for the 9 o'clock case? It's 8:57. If we want to take just a, in fact, that's what we'll do. We'll go off the record for just a second. Make sure we have the parties for the next case. I see a Ken C, which I assume is Mr. Arthur, on the screen. He may be, yeah, but I don't know if we have the appellants. And I will, we'll just go off the record for a second, and I'm just going to get a cup of coffee.
Okay.
Susan?
Yes.
Okay. Do we know whether we have Mr. Thompson and or Mr. Reel?
That case has been continued. The next case
Oh,
is
Really? Wait.
OSU on
Oh,
the agenda.
okay. I missed that.
It was continued yesterday.
Okay, I missed that. Okay, well, that resolved that issue.
And I believe everyone's here for the OSU case.
Okay, very good. Susie, back on the record, please.
Okay.
Paul, are we live?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. We're back on. Let the record reflect it's 9:02. We're going to call a Division of Industrial Compliance case. It deals with Newton Hall at the Ohio State University, and it's case number 20-0049. This is a request for reconsideration, as we noted on our docket. Let's have an introduction of the parties, if we could, first with representatives from the university. There may be as many as 4 of you, so I'd ask each of you to step in turn, say your full name, spell your last name, and the capacity by which you're here in a representative way for the university. I'll invite the division personnel to do the same, along with Columbus Fire officials. We'll have an oath administered and we'll hear from you.
And then I believe I've got
Here's some background noise, but go ahead. We'll start with Mr. Mitchell. Did you enter your appearance?
Yes, James Mitchell. I'm the in-house code consultant for MA Architects. That's spelled Mitchell.
Okay, and someone may need to mute because there's some background noise. Next representative, please, from the university.
Hi, this is Ken Cleaver with MA Architects. I'm a project manager. That's Cleaver.
Thank you, Mr. Cleaver.
This is Elizabeth Kelker, also with MA Architects. Last name Koelker.
Lois Kelker. And anyone else from the university? Okay, Mr. Eaton.
We have also, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We have also our engineer on the line today. I think he should introduce himself as well.
Yes.
Gary
Jones, Director of Fire Protection Engineering for Karpinski Engineering.
I'm not sure I caught the name, please. Could you say that again?
Gary Jones, Jones.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Okay. Now with Mr. Eaton.
Hey, good morning. Jeff Eaton, EATON, Chief Building Official with the Division of Industrial Compliance.
And then who's appearing today on behalf of Columbus Fire?
Battalion Chief Scott Sanders.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, so if Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Kelker, Mr. Cleaver, Mr. Jones, Mr. Eaton, and Chief Sanders would each stand, raise your right hand. Susie, would you administer an oath?
Yes. You each swear or affirm the testimony you will give today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, I understand. So this is reconsideration on having on the variance condition 3, which deals with a beam detector system. And I have a memo from Mr. Eaton, as do other members of the board, but I would invite whoever wants to speak on behalf of the university first to explain the request and the basis for the same.
Mr. Schneider, I think it's probably also prudent to let the appellant know that we have a different board makeup today. And there are consequences to that possibly.
Yes, thank you. I had put an asterisk on the last case, which I wasn't aware had been continued, to explain that. By statute, ladies and gentlemen, we're a board of 5, and so ordinarily a vote would not be split unless there was an abstention, and in which case there could be a 2-vote 2-2 tie, if you will. The point being is that if there is not a majority vote by the board, the adjudication order of the building official would be upheld just as a matter of protocol. So there are times, and there have been instances where we have been down one. In 1 or 2 cases in my term on the board, we've been down 2. Maybe someone has to abstain or recuse themselves, but the parties have wanted to kick the case out to make sure that they had a full board. In this case, our pipe fitter, Mr. Gehring, had a scheduling conflict and is unable to be here today. So there is a possibility, maybe not a great possibility, but a possibility that the board could be split, in which case you would not accomplish your objective. I'm saying that to the university at this point in time. But does the university still want to proceed with a board of 4?
I believe so. Hopefully the matter today can be well covered by our fire protection engineer, smoke system engineer, and you guys can be comfortable with what we're asking.
Right. Okay, and then I'll ask Mr. Eaton and Chief Sanders, you willing to proceed under these circumstances?
Chief Sanders here, yes.
Okay. Jeff's muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, this is Jeff. We have no problem moving forward.
I didn't think so. Okay. Well, then it sounds like, is Mr. Jones going to be the presenter at this point in time, or is someone going to make introductory remarks for the university?
I'll just make a real quick introductory remark, which is that we I guess I would say didn't anticipate the question about the smoke system when we were before you before, and so we didn't have the full explanation for the engineered system to share with you that day. As we looked at it and talked with our engineer about a beam detection system, and also with Mr. Eaton, it became clear that the university's best interest would be served by the system that we have in place already, and so designed, I should say, already. And so we asked for the reconsideration and wanted to share with you today what the system, the design system, includes.
Okay, and
before we start, Mr. Chair, if I could do a little bit of a summary as well too.
Well, Paul, I'm just trying, Paul, real quick. I'm just trying. Susie, did we swear the witnesses in?
Yes, we did.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Paul. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we did hear this case before several times. They came back. We did grant a variance. I did not vote for it, partially because the main stair that is in the atrium is not enclosed, and that is one of the main ways that people are going to exit, and the fire department is going to get in and be able to attack this particular fire. We had added beam detection as an additional condition to that variance. It's not something that, it wasn't designed. I believe everybody was there. I believe everybody heard the conditions. And I believe, in fact, you know, at the time, Mr. Eaton thought, well, you know, this is a belt and suspenders thing. Since we don't have the full systems, we are granting a variance for this. The addition of a beam detection system would only augment early notification for an open atrium. Since we know that the sprinklers are never going to go off. They're just too high off of the floor for the heat to get to there. So that's the reason why we had the beam detection. I'm interested in understanding why, after 3 or 4 different hearings that we've already had on this case, that, hey, your condition, hey, thanks for giving us a variance, the condition that you wanted, we don't want to do that either. So that's the position where I'm coming from, and I just want to have that kind of on the forefront just so that everybody knows where they're headed. Thank you.
Okay, well, the appellant representatives can reply to that, as well as Mr. Eaton and or Chief Sanders if need be.
I would like Paul, Mr. Begin to just respond to that a little bit. We obviously, or I hope it's obvious, we mean no disrespect and appreciate your additional time and attention to the case here. We did not have our smoke detection, fire protection engineer with us last time, and I apologize for that. What turns out to be the case in speaking with him is I'm just reminded there's a lot of geometry that flies through this atrium. It's not a strictly open 3-story space. So there's a lot of opportunity to introduce detection components throughout all the levels of the atrium. So that is what we wanted to share with you today, and I think Gary can speak a little bit more to that. Before I go, I should say we looked at how we could introduce a beam detection system. Our fire protection engineer recommended that we would not, in that case, want to not have the system we already have in place because he thinks it will work better. And that would then introduce 2 different kinds of systems for the university to maintain. So really this is in, just as an advocate for the university, for the long-term maintenance and health and safety of everyone who's there. Oh, Gary, if you want to share a little bit more specifics, that would be great.
Go ahead, Mr. Jones, you have the floor.
Yes, this is Mr. Jones. I am a fire protection engineer from University of Maryland with my fire protection PE in the state of Ohio. Whenever we looked at the atrium, of course, the purpose of the detection system is to activate the smoke control system. We looked at options for how to do that. Anytime that we design detection for an atrium and a smoke control system, I look at a couple things. One, how extensive can we get the detection in those areas? Sometimes the geometry doesn't allow very much detection to be put in those areas. 2 is maintainability of that system. And 3 is to try to keep down from nuisance alarms. So whenever we looked at this atrium, as Pila said, the walkways that cut through the atrium on the 3 floors consume a lot of the volume of the atrium. So we put an air sampling detection system, which is an advanced detection system, up on the roof level. There's actually 2 different zones of air sampling at the ceiling level. And then underneath each one of the platforms, as they work their way around the atrium, we've got addressable multi-criteria smoke detectors out in those locations as well. The water flow as well for the atrium is zoned separately, so that those 3 points of control would be the inputs for the smoke control system. One of our considerations whenever we looked at this area for beam detection was it's a rather narrow from side to side and area. So going the short way across the atrium, you're getting pretty close to the lower limit of what you can do for spacing on beam detectors. Running the longer way, there's glass window walls on each end, so that really cut down on the ability to place beam detectors, on the long end walls. And with the way that the walkways snake through the atrium, there aren't a lot of real clear sight lines from point A to point B, and we definitely don't want to have, people walking through or a maintenance man with a ladder walking through and activating the beam detector. We don't have a lot of height above the level. If we would have had another 20 or 30 feet of atrium space, beam detector up in that higher space would have definitely been appropriate. But that's one of the reasons why we didn't have beam detection. We went with the air sampling instead.
Okay. Before we hear from Mr. Eaton and Battalion Chief Sanders, any questions of Mr. Jones? or Ms. Kelker, members of the board? Okay, Mr. Eaton.
I guess I would ask, I heard a lot of the reasons why the beam detection can't be put in. Maybe ask the simple question, can it be put in?
When we met with Gary
I think I'd rather hear from the fire protection engineer who was given all the reasons why he didn't think it was a good idea. I just want to know if it can be put in.
I did sit down with M&A. We did a fly through the model where we can see the sight lines, and we could maybe squeeze one projected beam detector across the short way of the atrium that would not be necessarily in walking paths. It's that tight, and that was only about a 35-foot beam path that we're getting across that way. Like I said, we do have multi-level detection through the space. That's probably the most important aspect. With the extensive amount of walkways through the space, I think we've got somewhere plus or minus 20 conventional detectors on the 3 levels, and then the 2 zones of air sampling at the top. So we've probably got more detection actually in this atrium for control of the smoke control system than if it would have been just an empty atrium with the whole way up to the ceiling. The walkways provide us that ability to get spot detection on those lower levels. So, but yeah, one beam detector is about all we could really get in. We could not get complete coverage over the at the underneath the roof level with beam detection.
Does anybody have a plan of each level showing where each of these additional smoke detectors are located at? Or are we just supposed to say, oh yeah, we have them everywhere? And
we can share a plan with you, yes.
Yeah. What I'd like to see is, I mean, you're saying, hey, we don't need beam detection because we have devices everywhere at all the levels throughout all levels of the atrium. Can we see something like that so that we can understand?
Absolutely. I am pulling up the fire protection plans right now.
Will you be displaying those, or Paul, do you have to?
Yeah, I'm going to send them up live.
Okay.
Gary, do you have the sheets in front of you that you could tell me what pages you want to look at specifically?
Actually, Liz, this is Ken. I have the
Okay.
PDF of the full set open.
Okay.
I just shared my screen if anybody wants to, I don't know if you all can see it.
I can.
So basically what you're seeing on Ken's screen right now is you have underneath on the walkway, there's on that level, there's six locations where we actually have a smoke detector, and we've got an associated speaker strobe, beside it going around, and that continues up on the next level.
This is the 2nd level plan, and this is the 3rd level
This
plan.
is the 3rd. Sorry.
Yeah, we've got the same thing as we go around. We've got them underneath on the platform. Again.
Okay, so those detectors are really at the 1st floor then, is what you're saying, because this is underneath the walkway?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're at the 1st floor. What about 2nd floor?
This is actually the 1st floor. So these are on the walkways above. This is the 2nd floor. This is the 3rd floor.
What number are the detectors? Is that number 6 that I'm looking at? Is that keynote 6 or keynote 8? I mean, if you could point out the devices,
yeah,
so that I can understand. I mean, yes, I see an exit sign. That's great. or an emergency light, that's great. Maybe if you could point out exactly where each of the detectors are and what type they are.
Okay, so on this level, we're up at the ceiling level of the atrium, and the black dots that are denoted by number 6 in this drawing, that's the air sampling system. Okay, and then as we go down to the next level, which would be the underside of that walkway, which would be the equivalent of the second floor, the circles with the half-filled in X are the smoke detectors, and so we've got them around the perimeter. And then as we go down one more level, which would be the underside which would be the first floor ceiling level, which is the second floor walkway. On the underside of that, we've got the same thing. We've got smoke detectors around that perimeter. Really, the extensive amount of the landings and platforms through gave us that ability to get spot type smoke detectors out in those areas, that are easily maintained as well.
Okay. Maybe I'm not seeing this correctly, but I mean, I see, exit signs and emergency lights and horns and strobes. Can you point out to me again what keynote is the detector at each level?
It's this, right, Gary?
Yes, sir. That's it.
They look like exit signs.
So we got six of them going around. Yeah, 6 on each level.
6 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And then the 2 zones of air sampling up on the top with 5 points.
Hold on a second. I'm an architect. I know what an exit sign looks like. That's an exit sign symbol with a horn strobe next to it. Can you show me the list on the keynote where it says what that is specifically? Can you pull up the keynote list?
3.
And again, not that I don't believe you, but I'm looking at drawings and I don't see the devices that you're pointing out.
These are fire alarm plans, and that is the symbol for the smoke detector on our fire alarm plans.
To be clear, Gary, the symbol that you're using for smoke detector on your fire alarm plans looks like what would be on an electrical plan, a 2-sided exit sign designation. Is that correct?
Ken, can you pull up the legends?
Yep. So would it be good to see a 3D view of that atrium with the walkways? That might make it easier to visualize.
I have that pulled up already.
Okay.
Here, can you see that image?
Are we looking at the rendering now?
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Just to try to help explain where these detectors would be. This is looking essentially how we have been looking at the plan. We're standing plan south.
So you have to wait until we get those up. When you switch desktops, it takes a second for everything to line up. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. As I mentioned, we're sort of standing plan south right now, and you can see the grand stair. And you can see that we've got walkways on the 2nd and 3rd floors that are out into the atrium and also across the atrium. And then there's ramps that come down to connect the two levels. The building on the addition on the left is a higher floor to floor than the existing building on the right. So those walkways turn into ADA compliant ramps that come down to meet the existing second and third floor of the existing building to the right. And so there are detection devices on the underside of both of those sets of ramps, as well as up at the ceiling and on the bridges that cross the atrium as well.
If I could ask another question, I heard some testimony about specific types of air sampling devices. Is that interchangeably saying smoke detectors, or is there another device that you haven't talked about yet?
No, Paula, that is a VESDA type air sampling smoke detection system. A UL listed air sampling smoke detection system. There are sampling ports up on the ceiling at spacing that would be, where I think in our case here they're like 20, they're less than 30 by 30, and air samples back through those sampling ports, pulls back through a tubular network to the detector in the unit itself. So it actually pulls air and samples the air back into a sampling chamber for the detection application. So it's a UL listed. It's actually considered to be an advanced detection system from that standpoint.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions of Ms. Jones or Ms. Kelker from members of the board this time? Okay, Mr. Eaton.
Thank you. I think the last hearing we had, if it was mentioned that they had the air sampling system, I would have not have mentioned the beam detection, so I may have muddied the waters, but I wasn't aware the air sampling system was part of the proposed system. So I'm comfortable with that. I've talked with my my examiners. We've had similar cases where we've asked for beam detection, and it's been in venues where there's been hockey games, basketball games. Not having the beam detection at this college, apparently there's going to be potential for decorative banners to be hung, balloons hanging or going airborne that could fly in front of the beam detection, set off false alarms. We've had the remote control blimp at the Nutter and at Wright State and set off the alarm systems. So we're comfortable with the air sampling system and not having the beam detection. And that's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Chief Sanders.
Okay, for the record, I'm a 30-year firefighter. I also have a fire protection engineering degree myself from the University of Cincinnati. The reason beam detectors were requested and agreed upon in the beginning was the stairwell is going to empty into the atrium, the second means of egress. We have had numerous hearings and talks on Newton Hall, and it always seems to come back. Fire is opposed to any change outside the agreement in the last meeting. The engineer did say they can squeeze one in, and so I don't see a reason to not do that. That was the agreement the last time around.
Okay, questions of either Mr. Eaton or Chief Sanders from members of the board? Anything to present on behalf of the university further?
I guess I agree, safety first for sure. Just, be aware that, introducing a single beam detection, I don't know what the maintenance is on all these various systems. I don't know if that's requires any special skills or what have you. But, with a single detection system in there as well as a smoke detection, the university will need to maintain the two systems, which they're willing to do. and they obviously want to keep everybody safe. You know, I guess that's all.
I guess I would ask for details of beam detection, exactly what it is you have in mind. You know, I understand you've just spoke on it, but you know, this was the agreement we had in lieu of not having a second means of egress that went outside.
So the other thing that I would make note of is that from a code perspective, the building is meeting those egress requirements. It's not to have one stair that is enclosed and one stair that is not is permitted by the code. So that's not an atypical or non-code compliant condition.
Well, it's gray. I'm not going to dispute what you're saying. It's gray. However, as the authority having jurisdiction, Columbus Fire does have a right to have request.
Okay. All right. Let's hear comments and or sentiments from members of the board.
I have a question. Is there a safety concern with a beam detection system having one in there operating? Is there going to be false alarms? Is that a safety concern?
Brad, is that a question to the chief?
I guess to the fire detection engineer.
Mr. Jones?
Yes, I would say that with the configuration of the atrium and the location that we looked at as a possibility to put a beam detector, there is stuff in the center of the atrium. There are some you know, trees and other things like that that were in the rendering. Like Mr. Eaton said, you know, there's a also possibility of banners and other things hanging down. It could become a maintenance and nuisance alarm issue with the location we have. If, like I said, if we would have had an extra 10 feet of atrium space above that third floor landing, we wouldn't be here today. We would have put beam detectors across, you know, at that higher point and called it a day. But since we don't have a lot of height over that top walkway, it kind of takes away that whole zone for where you normally put the beam detectors. And same within the lower levels. Now we're trying to get in around those walkways to someplace where it can meet these distance limitations that you have, and as well as not become a nuisance, you know, alarm problem.
I'm not sure how a beam detector works. Is it actually hits the smoke and reflects back, or what?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, let's talk about that for just a second. I'll be more than happy to address that. A beam detector is basically a transmitter which sends a light beam across, and they act in one of two ways. They either hit a receiver on the far end, or they hit a reflector, which comes back to the transmitter again, and the transmitter is a transmitter and a receiver. So it's a light beam that goes across, and as smoke goes through the light beam, it obscures the light beam. It's very much like a photoelectric detector in functionality, where where you obscure the light beam with smoke. If you put something that blocks the beam 100%, you should get a trouble condition instead of alarm condition. But it still creates trouble conditions. If you flash something through the beam, you might get a trouble condition, you might get an alarm condition. It just depends, you know, what the percent of obscuration and how that detector interprets the blockage, you know, through the beam. Most times a blockage will result in a trouble. But yeah, that's smoke obscuration. And where you see it, a beam detector usually being of a lot more value is, let's say we would have had a 70-foot high atrium, you could have issues with stratification and smoke not getting the whole way to the roof level where detection would be. So you'll put beam detectors in at those intermediate levels that would be lower. In this case here, we were able to get the spot smoke detectors on some of those intermediate levels, and then that air sampling system up at the ceiling provides, the ceiling level, protection. And it's not an overly high atrium, in terms of overall height. So, the air sampling system, if there's a fire in the atrium, it will definitely pick it up and go off.
So there are receivers. It not only reflects, but there are receivers down below that the beam would, the receivers would detect the beam.
Yeah, like I said, there's two different types of beam detectors. One has a transmitter on one side and a receiver on the other. The light beam shoots across from the transmitter to the receiver, and the other one is almost like a mirror on the other side. It shoots across, and then the beam bounces back, and the transmitter and receiver is all in the one unit. There's really no advantage or disadvantage either type. They're just two different styles that the detectors are made in. But yeah, you're throwing a light beam across the space basically, and that's what picks up the fire. But it's also what can cause some of the nuisance alarms as well if they're not in the right locations. And to maintain those, you need to have them in places where you can access them to either adjust them and or service them annually. With the air sampling that we were able to put on the roof, we're able to put the last sampling port down to an accessible location. So no, you don't really have to get up to the, to the ceiling level again, to test the system. You can test from the most remote sampling point, which is an accessible location.
What's the problem with nuisance or false alarm? Do they call the fire department if they have one?
If it causes a trouble, it will call the university personnel for service. If it happens to cause an alarm, it's gonna set the fire alarm off in the building and bring the fire department.
Chief Sanders here. I'd like to ask another question.
Go ahead.
Do you guys have a model for fire load or smoke migration? What you're saying is this may or may not work. What you're proposing, we don't know for certain. I would request a model with that information before I'd be willing to go on with this.
And that's going to be a question for the chair that I'm going to ask Mr. Jones or Ms. Kelker to answer.
Okay.
A model for smoke evacuation or a model for smoke detection?
For smoke migration and for fire load. The fire load inside this atrium.
Gary, I think I need to rely on you here.
Yeah, I mean, we used Howe and Associates out of New England as our consultant for designing the smoke control system and designing the smoke control system, be it the fans and the exhaust, as well as the makeup air components that go into that. So there is a CFD model for the atrium that shows a fire that occurs, in the atrium from any fuel package that's on the floor of the atrium, and the detection system is based on where that smoke migration would be to activate the smoke control system. The fans are all up at the roof level as the exhaust or the intakes for the smoke exhaust fans are up at the ceiling level, but the detection system and the water flow are what causes that system, to turn on. There is not really a concern in this building because of the height from any size, like waste basket and higher type fuel load will have enough energy to get the smoke to the roof, to the ceiling level.
Okay, can you share that model with me with Columbus Fire Department?
You able to do that?
I would think so, Gary?
Yeah, I don't have access to the simulation parts of the model, here today. Hal has that information, but that's what we base the detection layout on. There is no stratification, concern or issue, from that standpoint. I'm not sure.
Gary, this is Ken. I have the report from Howe Engineering that documents their modeling, that I can share with Chief Sanders.
By what means are we going to do that?
Is that something that you want to see right now today, or did you want a chance to review it at some length?
I would like a chance to review it, but I'm not going to personally give my thumbs up on this request until I myself and my group get to review, and I believe the board's the one.
Okay, so let's regroup for 1 second then, because I want to make sure that we move forward best we can here, give the parties an opportunity to sort of be heard. I'll ask my colleagues on the board. What are your sentiments as it stands right now? I'm wondering whether or not we're headed to continuing this to allow the fire study to be evaluated, or what we may do.
Chief Sanders here, real quick. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
As you talk to the board. One more clarification. Columbus Fire needs the review of the design of the detection system along with the model.
All right, gentlemen.
Mr. Chair, this is Chip Welch. I'm not in favor of the reconsideration. I've not heard anything that, plants and banners don't warrant, don't put them there. It's as simple as that. We've already modified the building code and the fire code for the design of this building. I'm not in favor of extending further our variance or our exceptions to the codes for this project, especially considering that the fire department has not been given ample opportunity to review the modeling, to review the plans. I can't support it at this point.
Brad?
Well, it's just a tough one. We have two, Mr. Jones and the fire department are at odds on this thing. I can appreciate the technical differences here. We're getting into a lot of minutia, and I can see the Mr. Jones's point that a beam detection system, and also Jeff Eaton is now saying, going to be minimal value in here because of the physical arrangement of the building and for other reasons, causing false alarms and so forth. And on the other hand, I don't feel really comfortable with the fire department, who are also experts on the other side, saying, hey, look, we want a beam detection system. So, I would be right now inclined to go along with the fire department, but, I would be on board with if we want to delay this while the fire department reconsiders it, takes a look at this model, and maybe they would change their opinion, in which case then I would support it.
Yeah, I'll invite Paul's comments, but I generally would concur with what you said, Brad. If I had to do a thumbs up or thumbs down now, it'd be thumbs down based on fire's concerns, but I'd be open to a continuance to allow the dialogue and the interchange or the exchange of information that would allow fire to dig a little deeper to determine whether or not its comfort level were to change. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I would be open to a continuance. I know we've seen this many times in front of us, but I'd be open to a continuance to allow Columbus Fire the opportunity to review and possibly change their position. But I would be in agreement. It would be difficult at this point in time to move forward with the reconsideration against Columbus Fire. One question that occurred to me as we were having this discussion, and maybe this for Columbus Fire, if they wanted to take the opportunity to review those plans, does the smoke evacuation system have a manual operation that is accessible by the fire department? If they want, if they came in and there's smoke and it's not on, they have the ability to turn that system on.
Gary?
Ms. Kelly.
I was just going to ask Gary to speak to that.
I think we lost.
We may have lost him, yeah, unfortunately. Gained a truck driving by, but lost him.
He's flashing his microphone. Mr. Jones? See him flashing the microphone. Well, let me ask this, Ms. Kelker. If this the can were to be kicked down the road to allow that exchange of information for the battalion chief, would that be something that the university would object to?
I have to say, I think the university would like to be able to move forward with submitting for permit soon. And so if, and I truly, I actually appreciate the notion that we shouldn't be designing around banners and balloons. I couldn't agree more with that. However, given the walkways and whatnot that we have in here, we have people who are moving, right? So we don't want the beams to be in the way of people who would normally be moving. So the one location that we found where we could introduce a detector would be in a location that we feel comfortable wouldn't have people crossing it. If the addition of that detector satisfies the request, in addition to everything else that you've seen today, we would actually, I think, prefer to withdraw the reconsideration so that we can move forward with finalizing the construction documents and submitting for permit.
I don't think we can say that one beam detection is going to work. I mean, the way that the condition is written to the satisfaction of the building and fire officials. So after the battalion chief reviews the documents, if he doesn't feel that one beam is sufficient, he wants 2 or 3, it is to his satisfaction. So I don't think we can today tell you, hey, yeah, add one beam detector, you're fine.
Understand, but that review can occur during the permit process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything preventing you from submitting for permit at any time. You could have done it 2 months ago. I mean, this would just be an outstanding item on the order. I mean, and I'm sure Mr. Eaton's office would have given the university, the ability to move forward with construction, even if the review was done. So I don't think anything we're doing here is holding up that process.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we don't have the actual university representative here with us to speak to what he would prefer, but my inclination is to think that he would prefer to move ahead and work through the design at the within the permit process.
So we're at a position here procedurally where if you were to withdraw the request for reconsideration, the hearing would just adjourn. Otherwise, we'll deliberate and we'll vote on whether or not the reconsideration request is to be approved or not. What's your pleasure, Ms. Kelker?
Jim.
Or we could continue and she could withdraw an hour from now.
That's
That's probably the respectful thing to do for the university, so that we can give them.
You can consult with your client. Okay.
Yes.
Let's do the. All right. Yeah, we'll try to be accommodating here. I'll entertain a motion to continue at this point in time from a member of the board.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Chip Welch.
Is there a second?
Second, Brad Smith.
Okay. All those in favor of continuing this matter, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Ms. Kelker, Mr. Eaton, Chief Sanders, Mr. Jones, et al. Matter will be continued. Best of luck, and we'll see what happens down the road.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We stand adjourned. Is there a need before we call the next case to take a break? Hearing none. Susie, are you okay?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, very good. We'll call the next Division of Industrial Compliance case. It's case number 20-0077. Deals with the First Church of Nazarene located in Marion, and the division. Oh, I'm sorry, strike that. That case has been withdrawn. My bad. I think I'm dyslexic right now. The next division case is case number 20-0080. Deals with the Little Creek Barn reception hall located in Forest, and the division's adjudication numbers noted on our docket. Let's have an introduction of the parties, beginning first with the appellant. On the presenters list for the appellant, looks like I have Irvin Reinhardt as a tentative attendee, Jacqueline Bostelman, Lindsay Briscoe, and Ryan Conklin as counsel, and Josh Huffman. Is counsel present?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is Ryan Conklin with Wright and Moore Law in Delaware, Ohio, representing Little Creek Barn LLC. Okay,
very good. And then would the those that are in attendance with you, or you plan on having testify, identify themselves, state their full name, spell their last name. You could do this for us if you'd like. And then in the capacity by which they're here on behalf of the appellant, we'll do the same thing with the division, the building official, and then I'll have an oath administered to the witnesses.
This is Irvin Reinhardt with RCM Architects. Reinhardt is R-E-I-N-H-A-R-T.
Thank you.
This is Josh Huffman, H-U-F-F-M-A-N, with Charles Construction Services, the construction manager.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman.
I'm Jacqueline Bostelman, the owner, B-O-S-T-E-L-M-A-N.
Is Lindsay Briscoe present?
Yes, this is Lindsay Briscoe with RCM Architects. That's B-R-U-S-O-E.
Okay, Mr. Eaton.
Jeff Eaton, E-A-T-O-N, Chief Building Official with the Division of Industrial Compliance.
Okay, if Mr. Reinhardt, Ms. Bostelman, Ms. Briscoe, Mr. Huffman, and Mr. Eaton would stand, raise your right hand. Susie, would you administer an oath?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer unto God?
I do. Okay, let the record reflect the witnesses have been sworn. A couple housekeeping items. First of all, we're a board of 5, as we're supposed to be constituted. Today, we're a board of 4, which means that the deliberation math would change for a 2-2 vote. The adjudication order of the division would be upheld. In theory, you could have a board of 5. We could be fully constituted here today, and you could have an abstention and still have a 2-2 vote, split vote. But you would have the right, if you'd like, to wait and have this matter continued to a time when we have our full board. Our pipe fitter member, due to a scheduling conflict, was unable to join us today. Mr. Conklin, are your clients, is your client objectionable to moving forward or okay with moving forward with a board of 4?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll defer to them. We're in separate locations, so I'll let them answer from their location.
Okay.
Yeah, we're okay to move forward today.
Okay, very good. Second housekeeping matter. Obviously, Mr. Eaton, you're aware that you could have counsel present. Mr. Conklin's representing the appellant. He would have the opportunity to cross-examine you. You do not have the reciprocal opportunity to cross-examine the appellant. You would have the ability to have the assistant AG represent you, or perhaps in-house division counsel. Are you willing to proceed?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Case is called. Mr. Conklin, you have the floor.
And I'll turn it over to Irvin, his team. They're going to make the presentation on behalf of Little Creek Barn LLC. So Irvin, yours.
Thank you. The project in question consists of a new wedding venue on a rural site. It is the first floor of the building is primarily a wedding ceremony space, and the lower basement floor is primarily a reception hall for the weddings. The floors are not intended to be occupied at the same time. Essentially, the occupants have the ceremony, and then everyone moves to the basement. The reception hall space in the lower floor was designed based on tables and chair usage, as is typical of a reception space, to be able to be designed for 350 occupants. Our owner, our client, is appealing today the requirement for a fire suppression system in the building. It is adding a significant amount of cost to the project and is creating a hardship that may prevent the project from moving forward. There is an additional cost based on the cost estimate that was provided to you from Charles Construction of $294,000 for that fire suppression system. A lot of that has to do with, of course, being on a rural site and having to dig a pond to supply water for that system, and fire pumps and all of those very expensive systems. That is 15% additional cost over the base bid of the project without that system in it. So we consider that to be a very significant financial hardship. On that note, in lieu of the fire suppression system, we were proposing to provide a full heat and smoke detection system, and install heat and smoke detectors in each space throughout the building. In lieu of that fire suppression system. And that we felt provides early notification and gets people out of the building. As far as the means of egress, the lower floor does have ample means of egress to get people out of the building quickly. And the upper floor, we were actually proposing to add one additional means of egress. There are currently 2 from the ceremony space. We're proposing to add a third up near the front of the ceremony space to provide the minimum requirement for the code calculation for occupier. We do want to note that both floors do egress directly to the exterior. So you're not up and down in stairways, direct access to the outside. And we also shared with you a letter of support from the local fire chief for this change. A second consideration we're asking or requesting today is for a reduction in the calculated occupant load of the building. As we mentioned, the owner intends a maximum of 350 occupants at these wedding receptions, and to provide restroom facilities and HVAC systems to satisfy the overall calculated load feel is excessive and also a financial hardship. The restrooms additions would cost an additional $20,000, and the HVAC improvements to satisfy the calculated load be $110,000 according to Charles Construction budget. Once again, on these matters, we feel like the egress is going to be there, means of egress to satisfy that. And a side note, the parking lot itself that serves this facility has recently been cut in half to more accurately reflect the occupant load of the building. So if you've noticed in the plans, we did have a site plan showing a larger footprint for that parking lot that has been reduced or is being reduced.
Questions by members of the board and Mr. Reiner or Mr. Huffman?
Yeah, just a question on the egress door on the main floor. That was actually going to be one of my questions to you before. It almost doesn't look like you have the half the diagonal distance between the two doors that you have. So I'm assuming it's going to go onto the far plan right. Is that where that door is going to go?
That is correct. Yes, upper wall on the plan to the right side. So it'd be at the front of the ceremony space.
And does that exit out onto what looks like a deck?
No, that is an at-grade sidewalk.
Okay.
I have a question. Are you asking for an occupancy load of 500 or 500 for each level?
500 for each level, but we have also, I believe, received through a recent adjudication order from Mr. Eaton, he indicated acceptance, non-simultaneous use for the facility, as it pertains to restroom facilities in particular.
Any other questions of the appellant? Mr. Conklin, any, I guess, other questions of any of the witnesses?
I have no additional questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Eaton.
Good morning. As Mr. Reinhardt mentioned, we reissued a new order yesterday. We added an item 3. It's specifically towards the plumbing fixture count requirements. The original items 1 and 2, item 1 was regarding the fire suppression system. We're not opposed to the alternate systems for providing smoke, fire alarm and smoke and heat detection throughout the building. That one is okay. Item 2 was the occupant load request that they were trying to limit the occupant load. I'd rather that item be upheld and post the building for its actual tabular load. It sounds like they have enough egress to handle what table 1004 would prescribe for an actual occupant load. I think as previous cases, my comfort level isn't the best for posting a limited load. There's no way to police it. If there's a change in ownership, the new owner may not have the same programmatical use for the building. So I would say item 2 would be upheld, post it for what it should be. And then item 3 is specifically for the reduced calculation for fixture count. So we're not opposed to the proposed number of fixtures that they want to provide based on the table and chairs layout, but I'd rather see the building posted for its full occupant load.
Okay, before there's a inquiry of Mr. Eaton by members of the board, Mr. Conklin, any questions for Mr. Eaton?
No additional questions, Mr. Chair, unless the builder, Mr. Huffman, and architect, Mr. Reinhardt, would like to offer any to Mr. Eaton.
The only additional question I would ask is in regards to the HVAC systems, whether the same non-simultaneous use and basing it on 500 occupants could apply to that as well.
That'll be a question for me. Mr. Eaton, you can answer that.
I think the trigger there is the ventilation requirements. So I'm not sure if they have any additional opera windows and doors that could add to assist in the ventilation, but I think that's the only issue would be the mechanical ventilation. And to answer his question, I would not be opposed to that if they do have means for, operable doors and windows to make up what would be lacking.
Okay, questions of Mr. Eaton from members of the board?
I have a question.
I think I'm okay, with a variance for the sprinklers. I am a little bit concerned on this total occupant load thing. I understand Machine's point that yes, the building is going to be occupied. Would anybody be concerned about a condition that states that no two events can be used, can be planned at the same time? I'm okay with the non-simultaneous use. There's going to be people upstairs, there's going to be people downstairs. It's a wedding, right? I understand that. What I think I would want a condition is, hey, you can't have two events going at the same time. Would anybody be opposed to a condition like that?
Mr. Conklin?
Yeah, practically speaking, Mr. Chair, I don't think that would be a problem. Just would want confirmation from my client that not having two separate simultaneous events occurring on the different levels would be an acceptable condition. So, Jackie, I'll have you answer that one.
Yes, we feel that's an acceptable condition.
Okay. Any questions of any of the parties by members of the board?
Yeah, has the fire department reviewed this? Was there a letter?
Yes.
Yes, there was a letter supplied, signed by the fire chief, of course.
Okay. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts, comments?
Again, Mr. Chair, this is Paul Began. I would be supportive of a variance for the sprinkler system, and then a reduced occupant load for the number of fixtures, but not a reduced occupant load for the building.
Other board members?
Mr. Chair, this is Chip Welch. I agree with Mr. Began. I support the variance on the suppression system. I agree with Mr. Eaton about maintaining the posted occupant load based on the tabular calculation. What I don't support is a change in the HVAC system, because you've got essentially a basement level space that only has one wall facing the exterior. So I would be I'm not an engineer or an architect, but I would have a bit of a concern about sufficient air movement and heating and cooling, considering you've only got one wall that faces the exterior. And I don't think the financial hardship is there with respect to that issue, that they can't meet the code based on the calculations. If the upstairs bathrooms remain accessible and usable during an event while the wedding is moved downstairs, then I'm okay with the limitation on the or the change in the bathroom fixtures or count.
Brad?
Yeah, I mean, Chip, were you saying that you would require the full design for the plumbing or not?
No, I would not require the full design for the plumbing, but I would require the full design for the HVAC system, because you have a space that's essentially only has one exposure to the outside.
Yeah, I guess I go along with the fire department supports smoke detection system because of the extreme cost. Apparently, that would be an unnecessary hardship. And also, I agree with Jeff Eaton about the. I never really liked reducing the occupant load anyway in these projects. That makes sense, leaving it as is. So, I support, not providing a variance for that aspect. And the plumbing, I guess that's the third one, which is also they're allowing it for just half the occupant load, I guess. So I would support number one, variance, not number two, and number three I would support.
Okay, Mr. Costa, do you have anything further to present?
Mr. Chair, and unless Mr. Reinhardt and Mr. Huffman have anything to add, I think that would conclude our case. So,
Okay. Yeah, I'll gentlemen, Mr. Reinhardt, Mr. Huffman, any further comments?
Nothing to add.
Not this time.
Okay, Mr. Eaton, anything further?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Paul, do you need any time?
No, Mr. Chair. I do have one follow-up question. We did get some information for pricing for the sprinkler system. What I didn't get, just so that I can understand, how much that is, what the total cost of the project is.
The current budget for the project is on the top of that letter. It was close to 1.9 million.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Want to give something a shot?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, hold on one moment.
Right. And we'll give Susie a break after this hearing for a minute.
Okay, I've put some conditions up on the screen. Hopefully everybody can follow along with them. For item number one on the adjudication order, this variance is conditioned upon the following. Number one, an alternate fire alarm system shall be installed and maintained comprising of a remote enunciator at the front entrance, system smoke detectors with integral heat detectors throughout the entire structure, including within concealed attic and/or roof spaces, audible/visual devices throughout the entire structure, and pull stations at all identified means of egress. Number 2, the alternate fire alarm system shall be required to be off-premise monitored in a manner approved pursuant to OBC 901.6. Number 3, the alternate fire alarm system and off-premise monitoring shall be considered required systems and listed as such on the certificate of occupancy by the building official. Number 4, the alternate fire alarm system and off-premise monitoring shall be maintained as required systems utilizing the Ohio Fire Code and adopted NFPA standards. Number 5, an additional egress door shall be added to the first floor parent ceremony space and parent with an exit sign, emergency lighting, and egress hardware to the satisfaction of the building official. Number 6, simultaneous events are not permitted in both the first floor parent ceremony space and basement level parent reception space. Use and occupancy signage shall be posted to the satisfaction of the building official. Number 7, this variance is granted based on the use, construction, occupant load, square footage, and level of activity identified on the approved construction documents, including the maintenance of all building systems and any conditions required herein. And then for item number 3 on the adjudication order, variance is conditioned upon reduced occupant load for non-simultaneous use shall be utilized for calculation of number of plumbing fixtures and to the satisfaction of the building official.
Okay, Mr. Conklin, or you can certainly defer to Mr. Reinhardt, Mr. Huffman. Are those proposed conditions acceptable?
Yes.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Yeah, this is Urban Reinhardt. Once again, the only question I would have to that is there's no mention of the HVAC system issues. Is that something we need to define here?
I'll defer to members of the board in a second. Mr. Eaton, any comment on that?
The mechanical systems weren't part of the adjudication order, so I'm not sure if we could move forward with that. If they're not going to meet the ventilation, then it may have to come back under a separate request.
Yeah, that's going to be outside the four corners of the adjudication order that we're here to either uphold or grant relaxation to.
Understood.
Any weigh in there, Paul, on what Mr. Eaton just said, or Chip or Brad?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, and we have done it in the past. We have allowed for Mr. Eaton to amend his adjudication order and send it in. So we would look at an additional item to that. But that being said, I would still want Mr. Eaton's group to be able to review the submission and the requirements for that and what his position would be on it. I don't want to necessarily put him on the spot. So,
if I may interject, the request for appeal hearing that we did submit under item number 2, it did our language we included in the request. It mentioned the HVAC systems.
Yeah, I understand that, and I did see that, and I think that's part of our discussion, but it's like getting a speeding ticket. You get a speeding ticket for a particular area. We can't say, hey, you're going to speed in the church zone next Sunday. We need to give you a pass on that one as well, too. So we can only, I know you have it on your list, but we can only grant variances for items that are basically citations on the adjudication order.
Understood.
Yeah, this is,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Jeff. To be clean, that's what kind of why we added the plumbing section. So let the occupant load be what it's supposed to be. And then if there's hardships on ventilation, plumbing fixtures, appeal those specific items. It's a lot cleaner that way than having a blanket. Our occupant load wants to be this, so we don't have to do X, Y, and Z. So, to Paul's point, if we can have a chance to look at that, then if we decide, yes, it's in compliance or we need to modify anything, then we can always come back if we have to.
Hey, real quick, Susie, your screen is frozen. Are you still interactive with us?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Perfect.
Mr. Chair, if I may add, I would advocate for a solution similar to what Mr. Began has suggested, giving Mr. Eaton the ability to come back and amend. Without, if there's any way to have a solution where it wouldn't require an additional hearing or an additional appeal to come before the board, that would certainly be what I'd ask for on behalf of my clients, so they can move forward as expeditiously as possible.
I've got the feeling you weren't comfortable doing that, Jeff.
Without seeing what the system's currently designed for versus what it should be with the actual load, I wouldn't want to provide an opinion right now. But again, it's not something that would take long to do that. If we need to amend it, we could do that quickly. So.
I mean, given that, I mean, I guess, Mr. Chair, you could maybe take a straw poll for the benefit of the appellant, but maybe the best path forward, unfortunately, this one would be a continuance to allow that to happen, so that there's not, the appellant doesn't have to incur an additional application fee. Basically, holding this open for that process to catch up.
Mr. Conklin, we stand to convene again on the 28th. If you know, you're disadvantaged here because your client and client representatives are not in the room with you. If you want us to go on a short recess and you want to be able to communicate back channels with them, but one option is, Paul Began just suggested, is that allow this comfort level and time to amend, and we could put you, assuming that could be done in 2 weeks, we could have you back on the docket. It could be a relatively quick event. You know, I assume, let me before I get a response from you, Chip and Brad, are you comfortable on a straw poll basis moving forward, granting a variance and including the mechanical issues if the division were to amend?
Well, yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Chip. I mean, I spoke against the variance on the mechanical issues, but again, I'm not the engineer. I'm not the architect. It just, logic tells me that that's an issue in a confined space with up to 500 people in the room. Procedurally, I mean, if Mr. Eaton wanted to amend his adjudication order on the record, I don't have an issue with that. He's done it before, and really it's only secondary to the tabular count. So right. I'm fine with that, but I wouldn't support the variance on that issue.
Understood. And of course, we don't have Mr. Gehring here. Likely he'd be present on the 28th. Brad, what are your thoughts?
Wow. So he wants to design the HVAC system like he has the plumbing, which would be on the non-simultaneous use using the largest occupant load. So that would be like for the reception or the ceremony space, which would be like half the building. I'm not even sure how that would work. So the other part of the building is going to be under air conditioned or under heated or something because of that? I mean, that doesn't seem to make sense to me. It seems like you're going to HVAC the whole building. And so, you know, I'm not sure what you're asking, if Jeff amends it right now, whether I would go along with it. I think you need to look at it and see if that makes sense. You know, plumbing is probably not as written, but HVAC is important.
You're breaking up.
I'd be in favor of a continuance so Jeff can look at it and look at their calculations, see if it makes sense.
Okay, so there are the sentiments, Mr. Conklin. It seems like a majority of us, or maybe all four of us, would be willing to kick this out, let the division take a look and determine whether or not the division feels comfortable amending the adjudication. And we could invite you back at a hearing in the relatively near future. But there are some board members that don't necessarily will not project that they'll go along with the issues related to the mechanicals. And so now we're in a position where we need to decide whether we're going to adjourn and continue, or whether or not we're going to deliberate on what's in front of us right now.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll ask, Mr. Reinhardt, Mr. Huffman, since they're there in person. I certainly wouldn't have an issue if we take a short recess and allow me and my client to discuss the options here.
Yes.
I guess the big question I would have for the board and Mr. Eaton is, is 2 weeks a feasible time frame? No, the clients are getting into the end of September, and construction timeline would be a factor, and then also they're going to get into their harvest period for their family farm as well. So if I think if we can crank it out in 2 weeks, if that's doable, I think that would make it a feasible option. But wanted to ask that first before we go to a recess if necessary.
Mr. Reinhardt, Mr. Huffman.
Yeah, I think we would like the brief recess to discuss this, if that's acceptable.
Yep. Okay. Any other comments from members of the board right now? Otherwise, I'm inclined to grant the request to go off record, recess for a few minutes, and allow Mr. Conklin to have an opportunity to discuss this with Mr. Reinhardt and Mr. Huffman and his client.
I think that's a good idea, Mr. Chair. This is Paul Began. I didn't weigh in on the HVAC system. Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with my colleagues that, hey, if the space can hold 500 people, the HVAC system kind of has to be designed for 500 people. So I just wanted to get that position out, because I know that the appellant is thinking, all right, is it better to get our variance now? Or to wait a couple weeks and maybe have something a little bit different. I just wanted to kind of give my perspective so that you hear from all of us.
Okay, understood. Mr. Conklin, we'll go off record, and you can consult with your client representatives. Should we say 5 minutes? Do you think that'll be enough?
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could add one quick item.
Sure.
I'm not sure where the plan review is right now, but given a 2-week delay, if we haven't issued any type of partial approvals, we could cut that loose. That way there's no concern on the owner's behalf and the design professional that we're holding up the whole ball of wax just because of these couple of outstanding items. So I don't want there to have some relief that we can get you going in the ground if there hasn't been a partial approval yet pending. If this does have to come back 2 weeks, you don't have to wait to start work. So just keep that in mind.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Okay, we're off the record for a few minutes.
Yeah, or Jackie, if you want to just give me a call, that'd be best.
Yeah. Yep.
And do you have my cell phone number?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Just kidding. That's great enough.
It's the 2638 number.
And here's what isn't fun. Yeah.
All right, Susan, you there? Susie, you there?
I
Okay, Paul, Chip, and Brad?
Yes, I'm here,
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Conklin, have you had a chance to confer with, necessary parties?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and ready to give the decision on that front.
Okay, please do. We're back on the record, Susie.
Thanks,
All
Mr. Chair. Jackie, if you'd like to go ahead and give that determination.
Yep, we would just like to move forward today without the continuance.
Okay, all right, so the issue dealing with mechanical, which is not part of the adjudication right now, is not in front of us. Paul, how do you want to proceed?
Yeah, I'm okay with the appellant's request for a continuance.
No, we do not want the continuance.
Oh, you do not want one?
No,
Okay.
they want to move forward, so the mechanical issue is not in front of us, and I didn't know if you needed to craft some conditions.
Yeah, well, I think we already read through conditions for that. I mean, if we need to do it again, let me know, but I did already read through that.
Okay, and Mr. Conklin, those were acceptable?
Yes, Mr. Chair, those conditions were acceptable.
And Mr. Eaton?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, that being the case, I'd entertain a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals, case number 20-0080. The appellant is Jacqueline Bosselman for Little Creek Barn LLC for the premises Little Creek Barn Reception Hall at 17630 County Road 20, Forest, Ohio 45843. The appellee is Jeffrey Eaton, building official, Bureau of Building Code Compliance for the state of Ohio, and adjudication order number 2020-021241. I move to uphold item number 2 and grant a variance for items number 1 and 3 on the adjudication order, subject to the conditions that we had previously read into the record.
Okay, that motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so the variance is granted and the adjudication order is in part upheld based on a 4-0 vote. Anything further, Mr. Conklin?
No, Mr. Chair, appreciate you and the board members' time.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Eaton?
No, sir. Thank you as well.
Okay, very good. That concludes that case. Let's move to a case that was scheduled for 9:30. It's now past 10:30, so apologize for the delay. This is another Division of Industrial Compliance case, and it's case number 20-0083. Deals with the St. Gabriel Monastery located in Carrollton, and the division's adjudication number is noted on the docket. I have a presenter attendee list that was provided to me by Ms. Steer. Is Mr. Ellis, is he present?
Yes, I'm right here.
Okay, and is the pastor present? Is Mr. Ludwig present?
He is muted, so we need to give him direction on how to unmute his phone.
Okay.
Oh, there you
I see the father. I see him. All right, you're present. Okay, and Mr. Eaton's present. All right, let's begin. I'd ask that Mr. Ellis and the father and Mr. Eaton, in that order, each identify themselves, state your full name, spell your last name for our court stenographer, and the capacity by which you're here on behalf of the appellant and or on behalf of the division. Mr. Ellis, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Daniel Ellis, DanielEllis. I'm the construction manager working for the owners, representing them today.
Okay, Pastor.
Father Martin Oppel, OPPL. I'm the superior of the Order of Canon Regular of the Holy Cross and president of the corporation.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Eaton.
Jeff Eaton, EATON, Chief Building Official for the Division of Industrial Compliance.
Okay, if each of you would stand, raise your right hand, and Susan.
Do each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. It looks looks like Mr. Eaton, just item 1 is in play.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, Mr. Ellis, you have the floor.
All right, thanks.
Well, let me say, I don't know if you were on earlier, you probably were because you're delayed on this hearing, but we're a board of 4 rather than a board of 5 today. We're down 1 due to a scheduling conflict. Mr. Ellis, you still willing to proceed?
How does that affect anything?
Well, because as a board of 5, assuming everybody were to vote, the chances of well, there would be no, if everybody voted and no one abstained, there could not be mathematically a split vote. There could be with a board of 5 if there was 1 abstention or maybe a recusal, leaving us then a board of 4, or the abstention could be a 2-2 split vote. Point is, a split vote, the division's adjudication order would prevail. In order to be granted a variance, there has to be a majority or plurality. And so we would afford you the opportunity to continue this matter to September 28th in the more than likely event that we would be populated with all 5 of our members. I couldn't guarantee that, but I want to put that on the record. If you want to proceed in front of a board of 4 today, you're welcome to do so.
I'll just defer to Father Opal on that. What would you like to do?
Yes, we go ahead.
Okay. And Mr. Eaton?
We're comfortable as well, no problem.
Okay, very good. Mr. Ellis, go ahead.
Okay. As he mentioned, Father Opal is the superior of this religious order. He'll be living in the monastery building that we're discussing today. The building is a private home for up to 12 brothers and 2 guests. In addition to typical living and dining and sleeping areas, there's a library, a recreation room, exercise room, and as you might expect in a monastery, there's a chapel. Monastery is 20,000 square feet, projected cost of $3.5 million. The construction is concrete exterior walls and concrete floors, wood frame interior walls, a wood truss system. Exterior is cultured stone and ephes stucco and asphalt shingles. It's a 1-story building, except for a mezzanine choir loft in the chapel. This building is divided into 3 use classes. Area 1 is the chapel, and it's an A3 space. Area 2 is the monastery living space, and it's an R2. Area 3 is designated as business use. And in the R2 use group, we're required to have a sprinkler system. We've requested to install an NFPA 13D sprinkler system, which is allowed in R3 use class. It's a residential system. However, since we're an R2 use class, the minimum requirement is an NFPA 13R system. So what we're asking for is a variance to be allowed to comply with NFPA 13D. We feel it's a better scaled system for the building, and that with a few additional provisions, we feel the system can achieve or exceed the safety goals for fire safety and life safety for the building. The technical hardship that we're facing is the rural location of our building. The nearest municipal water source is 7 miles away, so we have to provide storage and pressure for the sprinkler system on site. Under 13R, this is going to require us to construct a separate pump house with a non-freezing buried water tank, rated pump, separate electric service. However, with the 13D compliance, it allows for a pre-engineered tank and pump package to be placed inside the building. The total cost for a system like that, we're estimating around $65,000 for this building. The significant financial hardship comes because if we have to comply with the 13R system, we're looking at going up in another magnitude of probably $100,000 beyond that, because of the storage, the building, the pump, the electric service, etc. We have discussed this with our local fire official. He's been out to the site and examined our plans. We do have another building very similar to this in construction that we just completed. In fact, we were here before the appeals board 3 years ago with the same exact request to do the same exact similar thing. And it was approved at that time. And we're hoping that we can do that again with this building. And as I said, the fire chief, having authority here for our local volunteer fire department that covers our area, he's in agreement with what we're wanting to do. The goal here is of course life safety and to get people out of the building as soon as possible, and to that end, what I talked about additional provisions. What we're thinking of doing is placing the water storage tank and the pump inside the building, inside of a fire-rated fireproof room, dedicated pump room, and also that the circuit supplying the pump would be underground feed, so it'd be protected from fire itself. At the same time, what we're wanting to do is upgrade the smoke alarm system so that instead of a non-interconnected alarm system in the bedrooms and immediate hallways, we would have a fully interconnected system with a smoke detector in every single room in the entire building. It's a large building, and having a smoke alarm activated in a non-occupied section of the building to notify people in other parts of the building makes a lot of sense and gets them out sooner, lets them exit quicker. And we'd like to take the money that we would save from the more expensive sprinkler system and put it towards upgrading these smoke alarms and protecting the pump room, as I said before. So we're requesting a variance to allow us to comply with NFPA 13D for fire suppression, with the additional requirement of placing the smoke alarms in every room interconnected so they sound and actuate throughout the building. We do have a letter from the fire chief where he's in support of what we're trying to do that I did submit. And I think that's just the basic intro to what we're trying to do. So.
Okay, before we hear from Mr. Eaton, any questions of Mr. Ellis?
Yes, Mr. Ellis, this is Chip Welch. One question. The windows in the bedrooms, do they open, and can an occupant use the window as a means of egress out of the bedroom?
Yeah, all the windows are sized larger than the regular windows in the building. They're casement windows, but they're upsized to meet egress requirements. Yeah, everyone can jump out of their window at ground level and get out of their rooms. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I do have another question. Are members of the public ever invited into the monastery? And I guess what is the maximum number of people that could ever be in this building? You mentioned that there was up to 14 occupants in terms of priests and 12 priests and 2 guests.
That's right.
Is there anybody else that would be in there on a regular basis, or?
No, not on a regular basis. It really is their private dwelling. In fact, the bedroom area is considered the cloister, where no one ever comes besides the brothers themselves. Just like a regular home, there are parlors in the building that they can, receive guests and, visitors from time to time. But in general, it's just their private residence. The exception, a slight exception to that is the chapel area, which is built for larger groups to occasionally come. They're not a regular parish church that has weekly meetings or weekly gatherings or even regular gatherings of the public, but the space is designed to have occasional groups gather there in the chapel itself. That's the A3 use assembly area, but the area that that's requiring sprinkler right now that we're talking about is the R3, and that area is really their private residence area. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Eaton.
We're in support of the variance request. One thing to point out, the assembly occupancy of the building is separated by a firewall. So technically that's a separate building. It would not require the 13D system. So we're in support with the condition that the 13D systems provided throughout the R2 and the business occupancies of the building. And the second condition would be the fire alarm and detection systems throughout the entire building, including the assembly portion.
Questions of Mr. Eaton?
I do have some general questions, Mr. Chair. I am not opposed to a variance for this particular project, but I do have some concerns that maybe some questions will help address. One, the separation of the building into separate fire areas with a fire barrier. I could not see in the documents provided that those fire barriers extend from the floor all the way up through the roof to the bottom of the roof deck. That's a question. I did not see that on the document, so I want to make sure that that is actually occurring.
Mr. Ellis?
I guess to answer the short answer is yes, and the slightly longer answer is we're still working with the building division to meet the requirement of firewalls and fire barriers. And maybe Mr. Eaton could elaborate on that, but I feel like we've been having a dialogue actually. I don't know if you know, but this hearing was postponed a month, and it was because at the last minute we started getting into these issues of firewall, fire barrier, and the definitions of them and how the building design complied. So we've been taking the time over the past month to address all that. I feel like that our architect, along with the building department, has addressed that, and that we're able to move forward with that.
Mr. Eaton?
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Ellis. I just had a conversation with our plan examiner yesterday who spoke with, I think at length, with Mark Viola, the architect, and the feasibility to make the B and R2 separation legitimate firewall was not really possible. The firewall actually has to be designed to allow collapse of either side and have structural integrity to remain in place. So that was possible with the A3 separation, but not feasible with the B and R2 separations. But to Mr. Biggins' point, I think the examiner was comfortable with the approach to bring up whatever they need to on the B and R2 separation to make it a legitimate separation wall, but not a firewall.
Thank you very much. So I would assume that your group will make sure that there's continuity of that fire separation, however it gets constructed, that goes clear to the underside of the roof deck.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next question I had, and I would have to do a little bit more code research, so maybe Mr. Eaton can help me out. The one section that we do have on the provided drawings, I do see that we are looking for rated corridors from the sleeping areas to the outside of the building. The section that we're provided with shows an open truss system and open air above that corridor. So yes, we have firewalls that, fire partitions to provide for a rated corridor, but fire can pass freely over the top. And I would assume that there's going to be HVAC into that. So what I'm worried about is the ceiling assembly of the passage from the sleeping areas, and or continuity of the fire partition for that corridor, so that it is enclosed. I know that's a lot of words, but if you were to look at a section kind of through, there's a section through the building. It's got an open roof truss. It's got, shows fire partitions that go up just above the ceiling with just, you know, 1/2 inch or 5/8 drywall at the ceiling. So fire can pass over that, what is a protected corridor. So I guess I'd want to see that that is addressed somehow. And I know these are still in process. And so maybe a response from Mr. Eaton about that.
Yeah, there's a number of ways they could provide that ceiling rating, either through a UL listed design of drywall or suspended 1 hour ceiling with a clip down. So we'll make sure that's provided. To your point, it's a partition, so the integrity is not really there from above, but it would provide a 1 hour tube with vertical and horizontal assemblies, and then any penetrations through that would be protected as well. We can make sure to follow up with Mr. Vital on that.
Any comment on that? Mr. Ellis, any comment?
No, that sounds right to me.
All right, members of the board, what are our sentiments?
I'm not quite done yet, Mr. Chair. One of the things when looking at this, I guess I'm okay with it going down. I guess the only difference between a 13R and a 13D is just the placement of the tank and the pump. Is that correct?
There's some other slight differences. One is, for instance, is that you're allowed to run the power for the pump into a regular circuit panel instead of having a dedicated disconnect switch for it somewhere, which, like when we did this previous building, that's what we did. We ended up running it into the panel, but we put it on a locked breaker, a locked double pole breaker, and it's clearly marked in the panel. That's sort of a minor issue, but that's just an example of there are some differences between the systems that just sort of allow you to sort of downgrade it in some ways, you know, electric wise. But in general, you're right. That's the significant thing, is that you can have the tank and the pump inside the building, you know, where it's protected. And but although usually it's not required that it's in a fireproof room or anything like that, it's just you can have it in a basement of a house, you know. So that's why we're sort of trying to upgrade that and put it in a dedicated fireproof room. And that's on our plan. We have a room already designated for that, sort of hoping that we're going to get this variance, but yeah.
Is there any backup power to that fire pump?
It's not required. It's not as designed. We do have on our plans a future generator is shown on the plans for the entire building. In fact, we're installing the automatic transfer switch is being installed during the current construction, and right now the generator is shown to be a future generator. So basically, we're allowing for it. At that point, there will be that full backup power system for the sprinkler pump. But short of that, no, the only power source would be just the regular grid power coming into the building.
I have a question. Where is the room in the building that you have dedicated for it?
What was that? Did you say?
Which room is shown on your plan?
Do you have the plan pulled up?
Yes, I do.
It's room number 154. It's if you look in the middle courtyard area, in the lower right hand corner of that courtyard, just right off to your right, there's a room there. On sheet A1.1, it says sprinkler room. Did you see that?
Yes, I see it. Why don't you put in your generator now as part of this project?
Just cost issues. Just trying to control the budget and just saving that money for that. See, the entire project is paid for with donations, benefactors, and we continue to build the project as money comes in, and so we're always trying to see where the money is going to go, and it will eventually go in. But let's say they get to the end of their money and we want to have occupancy of the building, but they haven't quite raised enough money for the generator. It's just putting it out there as a future expense. They know they want to do it. It's just they don't want it to hold up occupancy, when they're ready to move in. But that's what's the situation there.
I mean, it seems like in a fire, isn't that one of the first things that goes is the electricity in a building? Maybe that's a rhetorical question, but
I understand your point.
Yeah. For Chip, I mean, that's a question for you, Chip. I mean, is electricity one of the first things that goes?
Typically, and it's typically one of the first things you want to shut off in a fire. In all honesty, I mean, a 13D sprinkler system really, and obviously Neil's the expert, but it's not designed necessarily to put the fire out, but to give the occupants safe passage out of the building. I mean, if you think about it, the size of that room, the size of the tank, the tank is what, Mr. Ellis, maybe a few thousand gallons, if that?
Well, it's just it's less than 1,000 gallons. It's just designed to be able to run, what is it, two sprinkler heads for 10 minutes. I mean, it's exactly like you say. It's not to protect the content. It's just to give people time to get outside the building, and that's what. And the owner's very well aware of that. That it's life safety is the goal. So.
Yeah, I mean, I support the variance not simply, but because we're at least doing enough to get the occupants out safely. And that's why I asked the question about the windows, if they're operable for escape. If something should happen in that hallway where the residents are located, I'm fine with the variance. Certainly, I'd like to see a backup generator, but I don't know if it's I think if it's installed off of the main panel correctly, where it's buried and whatnot, you have a chance of running that system for at least that 5 or 10 minutes. But
yeah, I would add
at least long enough to get the occupants out.
I would add too that electric path-wise, the entire pathway to the pump would all be underground in the building. I mean, it would. I guess it would pop up to go to the panel and then go right back down and then go to the pump. But it's you don't have a conductor going hundreds of feet through the building that's up in the air or at some place that fire could reach. So we do understand about trying to protect that pathway for electric as much as possible. But again, we're just trying to protect the people.
Mr. Chair, if I could interject one thing.
Please.
As far as the generator, the NEC allows multiple electrical services to buildings with a few exceptions. Normally it's for very large structures that have to travel a long way, but in this case, in lieu of the generator right away, it's possible they could provide a second service dedicated strictly to the fire pump and not be fed out of the panel. So to Mr. Welsh's point, if they would come under a fire response and pull the meter for building services, they could leave intact the second service that feeds the fire pump. maybe a more cost-effective solution and level of safety right now until they would get the generator in place, and then we could label the service that this is fire pump only, and then leave that intact for the fire departments if they respond. But just an idea. I'm not sure what kind of cost is involved with that, but that's an option.
I would think it's a new meter and disconnect.
Correct.
Well, I mean, that sort of opens up a whole different discussion. I mean, even the generator that goes through an automatic disconnect, you know, that's still going to be pushing power through the building in the same electrical pathway as the other service was. It's just going to take it off the electric grid and put it on a generator. So in that sense, you haven't really achieved that you know, the goal either. I mean, I guess I'm arguing against myself now, but it bringing in a separate electric service, you'd almost have to just come in a whole different pathway, you know, which at this point it would be a hard thing to accomplish it, you know. Yeah. And I guess that we're just requesting that not be, just given what we're trying to accomplish, which is life safety, that not be really an issue. I mean, if we kind of back up a second and realize with interconnected fire alarms, smoke alarms, sorry, throughout the building, more than likely people are going to be out of the building before the sprinkler heads ever actuate, just because the early warning of smoke is going to get people out before a sprinkler head actually actuates. And the fire alarm, the smoke alarm system itself will have battery backup, you know, so it won't be dependent on anything with the electric grid.
Well, let me ask you a question. The alarm system consists of what?
Well, what we did with the convent is we ended up putting in a low voltage interconnected system with a master control panel right by the entrance.
I mean, how are occupants alerted to a fire?
How are they alerted?
Yeah.
A combination of horns and strobes throughout the building.
Okay, I mean, so if somebody's sleeping there and they happen to be deaf, they're going to be limited.
Well, yeah, the way it worked on our previous building is there's strobes in every bedroom, and there's in a few of the other gathering areas, and there's plenty of horns. I mean, that could all be, that could all be designed to the satisfaction of the building department. As far as that, people, like you said, people have to be alerted for sure.
Well, let me bring it, since we're having this discussion about the sprinkler system and or the electrical to it. I mean, I'm sure you understand, Mr. Ellis, our fire official on our board's point, right? Hey, the first thing they do is turn off the electricity, which, there you go. Then that system's not working anymore. Because I assume you don't have adequate pressure there. That's why you need the fire pump.
Correct. We just have wells, and then you're just, I don't know, we don't have pressure. Well, we could probably have pressure, but we wouldn't have the quantity of volume of water.
Yeah. So, and this is something that I learned being on this board pretty quickly. As design professionals, hey, we need to get people out of the building. That's our biggest thing. The sprinklers will give people more time to gather there. But we forget that responding fire department has to go in there and do a search of every single room to make sure nobody's in there. If for some reason one of the priests that our brothers that is there is incapacitated and in their room, having that sprinkler system on until a fire department can do their sweep of the entire building to get to them is just as important. So I do think that is something we can consider. Let me throw this one out, because as I was reviewing the drawings before our hearing today, one of the things that did occur to me is, hey, is it, yes, we have the generator possibly do that, but is it possible for the system to be able to, if we move this tank and fire pump room to the outside wall, I don't really like the location of it, to have to go into the building to get to this. If it is moved to an outside wall location, can that be a hose connection added so that the fire department can supplement that water if needed? And it's probably more of a question to Chip than it is to anyone else, since we don't have Neil here.
What I don't know, Paul, is if a 13D system, to get into the minutia of NFPA, I don't know that it's designed to allow supplemental hookup from the fire engine. I just don't.
Yeah.
Well, I can say that we that's what we did with the convent, the previous building. There's a fire department hook connection, and it doesn't take moving the pump or the tank near the outside wall. It just takes having
it does if they can't get to it because the fire's right in front of it. That's why we put it on the outside wall, so it can be gotten to without having to go into a burning building.
Well, I mean, the fire department connection point needs to be outside the building so they can hook up to it. But as long as that's piped through to the sprinkler system, then as soon as they start pumping into it, they're pumping water into the system.
They'd have to go into that room to activate a valve.
I don't think that's necessarily.
Who just said not necessarily? Was that Mr. Ellis?
No, that's me. That's Chip.
Oh.
No, if the FDC is on the outside of the building and basically is used to supplement and pump through the sprinkler system or the sprinkler pump itself. So if designed correctly, there should not be a valve that has to be opened on the interior to allow the fire engine to pump the water through into the sprinkler piping.
And we would definitely be willing in this written into this variance that we provide a fire department connection easily accessible in the front of the building. So as soon as they arrive, they can hook up and be supplementing whatever water is necessary, or even if the pump would have, in theory, completely died or the electric would have died, they can just be pumping straight from their trucks and make the sprinkler systems function.
Any reaction to that?
I think that's a good option.
Yeah, I would definitely support an FDC connection somewhere. I'd leave the placement up to the fire department based on their procedures and how they operate. I don't want to design that part of it, but it makes sense.
Mr. Eaton?
I'm comfortable with that as well. I think that's a great go-between.
Paul, Brad?
Obviously, I'm in favor. I think what I would still like from my colleagues and maybe from Mr. Eaton as far as the location of that fire pump room, again, obviously bigger buildings, different sprinkler systems, those are always on the outside of the building for good reason.
Yeah, I think that's what you're up against with this. Normally the 13Ds aren't allowed in R2. It's only for R3, like the townhouse type configurations where you don't have, the other hazards of occupancy. So, how it's rated, how it's protected is something we'll have to look at.
Okay, Paul, do you need some time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put it to rest only, and I might be the only one. I guess I would, again, maybe my colleagues to me, I would want to see that move to the outside of the building, just in case we need to get access to it somehow, that we're not having to go, into the building to, or at least near and, enough to a door that they can get access to it without having to try to figure out where the fire pump room is.
Can you, do we have the site plan of that we could pull up? I wanted to show you sort of how accessible that pump room is to the outside of the building. If a site plan should be towards the end of the submittal of sheets that I had submitted. Basically, though, there's a fire truck fire path around the entire perimeter of the building, and on the back side of the building is a corridor that feeds through where you can go right into the building, and it's about 20 feet to the pump room, just from a corridor straight from the outside.
I'm looking for site plan. I don't see it in your drawing set.
Oh, it's possible that I didn't include. Let's check here. Maybe I didn't.
We have the floor plans, but we don't have a site plan.
Okay. I think I have it. I have it here. And I may not have it on this machine.
I could share the floor plan at least, so that everybody can take a look at that.
Yeah, and the floor plan really sort of shows it as well. We've already seen where the pump room is. So if you go right out of the pump room and you turn right, there's a wide corridor that takes you right out 2 double doors to your right, and that is sort of the back side of the building. But what I was going to show you on the site plan is that we have a fire truck pathway for driving the entire perimeter of the building all around. So, of course, the fire department would have to be aware of where the pump room is, but we have a really good relationship with that department. In fact, when we finished the convent, we had them all come out with their trucks and drive around and see where all the trucks could reach, and we showed them the sprinkler system and the fire alarm panel, and the sisters gave them milk and cookies, and we basically we're planning to just make sure they know everything about this building and the way it works. And if it took some kind of a signage or something, a little placard on the building that said, fire pump room accessible through back door, that could be done. But what I'm saying is the location where it is really pretty accessible. And that's really by design. We wanted to be able to, move equipment in and out and service it, and just be able to have easy access to that pump room. So.
Okay, well, let me try to get a handle on this. Where do we think we are then in light of that?
So may I say something also?
Sure, Bob. Go ahead.
Father Oppel. So just to mention the 13D system, 13R system. I'm not in any way an expert of code, but first of all, I think both systems are only designed to get the people out. So it's not that this is in any way an advantage in regards to that is longer sprinkling. This is at least how I understand it. Mr. Eaton, please correct me if I'm wrong. And then the second thing is this hookup. I think for me it would be more important to think about it. That this hookup is actually outside in a location where the fire department can hook it up easily. Maybe outside in a way that they are away from the fire. And technically it hooks up through a check valve onto the high power side of the whole system. So it's behind the pump. So there's no need in any way that as soon as this is hooked up and the fire department, whatever fire engine pumps water into that building, there's no way that anybody has to go inside the fire sprinkling room, because then this is useless practically, because the use of the fire sprinkling room is taken over by the fire engine, which pumps water into the building. So therefore, I cannot follow really the argument why that room should be accessible. For us, it's difficult to move that because we need to have this access to get the stuff in. So, but again, for me, it's a matter of principle. It's just to point out that I don't see any advantage in having that moved to the outside wall, because in the case of a fire, then it would be more important to have that hookup in a place where the fire department can get in or has access to in a good way. But then the fire engine will replace practically then this fire pump, and there's no need anymore anyway to get into that. So that's my opinion on that.
Have any additional questions, Mr. Chair?
Okay. Where does that leave us then?
Well, Mr. Chair, this is Chip Welch. I support the variance with the addition of the FDC, working with the building department and the fire department for placement.
Thank you.
And appropriate signage.
Brad?
Yeah, I guess getting back to life safety, I guess by the time the fire department gets there, it's more like providing sprinkler system so the firemen can go through there and try to rescue people. I mean, hopefully everybody's out by then. Since I think I read somewhere it's a volunteer fire department, so it's going to take them a little while probably to get there.
Right.
Seems like the ideal thing is actually have a, whether a separate electrical system or something like that that keeps this thing going immediately. But in lieu of that, I guess the fire connection, I would support the variance with the fire department connection. I'm with you, Chip.
Paul, where are you?
I think so as well too. I do have some proposed conditions. Maybe we should read through those first and then figure out if we wanted to go to a motion from there.
Agreed.
I'm going to throw up on the screen, and hopefully it's not too difficult for everybody to read, some proposed conditions to consider for support of variance for this case. The variance is conditioned upon the following. Number one, an alternate fire alarm system shall be installed and maintained, comprising of a remote annunciator at the front entrance, system smoke detectors with integral heat detectors throughout the entire structure, including within enclosed attic and roof truss spaces, audible/visual devices throughout the entire structure, and pull stations at all identified means of egress. Number two, the alternate fire alarm system shall be required to be off-premise monitored in a manner approved pursuant to OBC 901.6. Number 3, the alternate fire alarm system and off-premise monitoring shall be considered required systems and listed as such on the certificate of occupancy by the building official. Number 4, the alternate fire alarm system and off-premise monitoring shall be maintained as required systems utilizing the Ohio Fire Code and adopted NFPA standards. Number 5, a fire department hose connection into the automatic sprinkler system shall be provided to the satisfaction of the building and fire officials. Number 6, the fire pump and tank room shall be protected with a 2-hour rated enclosure to the satisfaction of the building official. The corridor from the exterior to the fire pump and tank room shall be constructed as a 1-hour rated enclosure. Signage shall be located on the exterior of the building near the closest doors to the fire pump and tank room for identification to the satisfaction of the building and fire officials. Number 7, all fire barriers between fire areas must extend from the floor structure up to the bottom of the roof deck. Openings into fire barriers shall be protected according to OBC 716. Penetrations through the fire barrier shall be protected according to OBC section 714. Scroll down here. Number 8, egress corridors from the sleeping areas shall be protected by a 1-hour rated fire partitions, including a rated ceiling system with required opening protectives for electrical, mechanical, and sprinkler penetrations. Number 9, all sleeping rooms shall be provided with a window meeting requirements of an egress window per OBC section 1030, including an egress identification site at each window to the satisfaction of the building official. And number 10, this variance is granted based on the use, construction, occupant load, square footage, and level of activity identified on the approved construction documents, including the maintenance of all building systems and any conditions required herein.
Okay, Mr. Ellis and Mr. Eaton, those are a relatively lengthy set of proposed conditions. Mr. Ellis, any comments or questions with respect to those?
We weren't proposing that the alarm system would be remote monitored.
We are.
Yeah, in speaking with the fire department, there was this discussion that there's the false alarms that happen. The fire department musters up a volunteer fire department. They get out here 15 or 20 minutes later, and it's a false alarm. I guess what it goes back to is we're really not wanting to rely with this building on the fire department. I mean, we want them to come, and they will come because they'd be notified by a phone call if there really was a situation. But otherwise, the plan is that everyone, would be out of the building and before the fire department ever shows up, because like one of the members mentioned, it is a volunteer fire department, and in the best situation, if everybody just happened to be very close by, they're not going to be here for 10 minutes. But.
Oh, Mr. Ellis, I disagree with you because number one, the alarm companies will contact the occupant or the building owner, whatever number or contact person you provide to verify before they dispatch or call the dispatch center to send the fire department. So there's an opportunity to stop the false alarm. Somebody's just got to respond to the phone call. I 25 years in the fire service, I would much rather go on a false alarm than not get notified of an actual emergency, or to rely on occupants who are scared out of their wits in an actual emergency that they got to call 911, because that's the last thing they're thinking about. So to me, this is not an option. I mean, it's just not. But I'm only one member of the board.
Right, Brad, Paul? Paul proposed those conditions, so.
I mean,
Brad?
the whole discussion about the fire department taking 20 minutes or 30 minutes and we're not relying on them, it doesn't give me a level of comfort. Well, I think Chip's exactly right, you know.
Okay, well, we've heard the comments from Mr. Ellis. Mr. Eaton, any comments or questions with regard to the proposed conditions?
No, I'm in agreement with them as proposed. Thank you.
Anything further from the appellant, Mr. Ellis?
If Father Opal would like to have any comments, I don't really have anything else to add to that discussion.
Father Opal?
No, it's okay.
Okay, very good. Is there a motion?
You want me to do it, Paul? Or
No, that's right. I got it
Okay.
set up here. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals, case number 20-0083. The appellant is Father Opal for Order of the Holy Cross for the premises St. Gabriel Monastery at 164 Apollo Road, Southeast, Carrollton, Ohio 44615. The appellee is Jeffrey Eaton, building official, Bureau of Building Code Compliance for the state of Ohio, and adjudication order number 2019-021272. I move to grant the variance subject to the conditions previously read into the record and noting the no objection of the building and fire officials.
Okay, that motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chair, Chip Welch.
Okay, that motion's been made. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The variance is granted on those 10 conditions on a 4-0 basis. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
much.
So I understand Chip has a hard stop at noon today because of another commitment. So let's, unless we need a break, Susie, how are you doing? I got a thumbs up from her. Members of the board?
I'm good.
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on to our last division case. This is case number 20-0050. It deals with cabins that are located up at the Mohican, and the division's adjudication number is noted on our docket. Let's hear an introduction of the parties, beginning with the appellant. State your full name, spell your last name, and the capacity by which you're here representing the appellant. We'll do the same thing with the building official. I'll have an oath administered and we'll move forward.
My name is Laura Mooney, last name spelling M-O-O-N-E-Y, owner of Mohicans, and my husband Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Mooney, M-O-O-N-E-Y, and I'm an owner.
Got it. Very good. Mr. Eaton?
Jeff Eaton, E-A-T-O-N, Chief Building Official with the Division of Industrial Compliance.
Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Mooney, you probably heard, if you were on the line, interactive with us because we're running late, that we're a board of 4 rather than a board of 5. So in theory,
Yes, we are aware.
Okay, are you willing to still proceed in front of a board of 4?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and Mr. Eaton?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you'd each stand, raise your right hand. Susie, would you surround? Can't hear you, Susie.
I swear.
Yeah, she's.
Okay, thank you. Do each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like based on the memo that we received from the division that items 2, 3, 4, and 5 are in front of us. And with that, Mr. or Miss Mooney, Mrs. Mooney, you have the floor.
Thank you. So we have submitted plans to the state of Ohio for our treehouse platform, which supports an Airstream. We call it Airstream Treehouse. Plans were not approved for an adjudication order was issued. Plans have been resubmitted. And there are several items that we would like to appeal in the process. But the resubmitted drawings do address some of the items on the adjudication order, hoping that those questions are cleared up with that resubmission. Specifically regarding item 1.2, that there's no more than 2 stories above grade. For the drawings, they are showing that the Airstream is a 1-level structure. Despite the fact that it is a tree house, by nature, we can't move past that fact, but the Airstream itself is a 1-story structure. And then the other issue we're hoping the drawings will address is egress from the habitable levels. And it does show on the drawings the exit path and down the stairway to ground level. But the other items we are requesting, and I'm sorry, item 2, RCO 106.1.38, they have included information on mechanical, plumbing, and electrical as they believe necessary, our architect. The remaining items are items of appeal.
Okay, questions for Mrs. Mooney by members of the board?
No, I thank you for submitting the drawings and things like that. I think conceptually we understood that you're trying to put a trailer in a tree, but it's good to get the documents to kind of see what everything that's planned.
Yes, of course.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Eaton.
I did spoke with the plan examiner yesterday. Apparently he had a conversation with the design professional regarding some of the items, and since it just happened yesterday, I don't think Bill Phillips, our plan examiner, has had an opportunity to get through all the information to determine if we have compliance with some of these items on the order. I know there was an issue with a question on the grade plane elevation. The number of stories obviously was an issue, but there was additional requirements on unvented room heaters that I think the architect indicated they were going to provide vented systems. However, we didn't have that information yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Go ahead, Mrs. Mooney.
I think William actually missed that per my conversation with the architect yesterday. He did indicate on A1 that it is a vented unit. It's a portable, basically heat pump AC heating unit. It was just an oversight. The architect, when I spoke with him yesterday, said, I think William missed that. If we wanted to provide the specs on that, we can certainly do that. That was a conversation I had yesterday regarding that particular item.
And I don't know, there's other caveats to that item number 2, as far as plans for the plumbing systems, of the electrical systems.
Meaning that they want additional information included in the drawings other than what was added from as a result of the adjudication order. Okay, that was not communicated to me, but I understand.
Questions by members of the board of Mr. Eaton?
Well, let me ask this procedurally. Obviously, there's still some plan review items that need to be done. Does that impact us moving on a variance at this point in time? Should we, let a little bit more time go by so everybody can finish communicating before we rule? Just trying to figure out procedurally what the best thing to do here.
Well, I mean, I think our objective has been, as long as I've been on the board, is that, we like to make informed decisions. we don't like to just, pin the tail on the donkey. I mean, so the more information, the better. So I think that would weigh in favor of maybe pushing it out a bit, but I'm, not necessarily married to that proposition. I hear from other members of the board.
Well, it's probably from Mr. Eaton is probably more my question is directed to if he wants to wait till his team finishes their complete review, gets everything answered before he would want to support a variance.
I think the items in our order are pretty global. I mean, these are big ticket items just to the nature of what this is.
Okay.
So I guess I could go either way. If you grant variances on it, we can work out the minutia details as far as the systems. But I think just the fact that this thing it's an Airstream, it's not a conventional building. The foundations, the energy systems, if we would get to a point where we could get a variance on that, then how it's put together and wired and plumbed, we can handle that. So
I tend to concur with that.
Members of the board, are you comfortable with that?
Which items are we adjudicating? It sounded like she didn't list them all. I mean, I'm just.
Correct.
Well, let me throw this out there then. Obviously, there's some of these items that we can't do. Item number 2 on the adjudication is the systems description. I'm thinking maybe that one gets upheld. It's up for Mr. Eaton and his team to decide what that description needs to be. And for us to grant a variance on that requirement, I think is probably not a good idea. That would still allow those parts to move forward. And Mr. Eaton can decide what is an acceptable description of that system.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree.
Chip?
I would support a continuance. I mean, I don't know that I have enough info. I mean, if Mr. Eaton's not comfortable, I don't want to force the issue.
Okay.
I think we can get there. I mean, I don't want the appellant to misunderstand. I think we can get there. It just timing was not good.
Yeah, from a big picture standpoint, I understand that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 items that we're looking to appeal and looking for a variance on: accessibility, minimum ceiling height due to it being an Airstream, the foundation construction being non-conventional, and the energy efficiency, the res check because it's an Airstream. Those are the things we're looking at variances for. The other items, I do believe that we can continue to provide some additional information in the plans to get those items cleared up. But again, the other items that we're requesting a variance for, I mean, I'm okay if we want to try and navigate that today or continue so that those other items that we can add to the plans to clear those items up are not present on the adjudication order. And then the only thing that would be left are the items of appeal. I'm fine with either scenario.
So we're going to meet next in 13 days.
Okay.
I'm not sure if 13 days is enough time. But if it is, then maybe we put you down on our 28th docket. Mrs. Mooney.
We can make that a goal. And if we're a week out and we don't feel like we have information included in the plans that will satisfy the adjudication order, we can push out farther from there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Jeff, you're comfortable with that, correct?
Yeah, we have no problems getting this in 2 weeks.
Okay. And Brad and Paul, you okay with that? Continuing this matter?
Yeah, I have a question for Jeff. Jeff, one of the things is kind of my bailiwick here, the foundations on this thing. I mean, are you guys done reviewing that and you're just throwing it to us and saying, is this okay?
Yeah, so we're passing the baton to you guys. The foundations are the trees, so.
So we have added a structural review, and that sign off is included in the plan. So yes, that's where we are in the process. So I concur again with Jeff on that, where we are.
Okay, well, I appreciate your accommodation as well. I would entertain a motion to continue.
Mr. Chair, for Board of Building Appeals case number 20-0050, I would move to continue.
Okay, that motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got multiple seconds. Motion's been made. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the matter, Mr. and Mrs. Mooney, Mr. Eaton, will be continued presumably to the 28th, and if it needs to a further kick from there, that can be determined at a later point in time. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks a lot.
Thank you for your time today.
Okay.
And we should, Mr. Chair, we probably should have Mr. Eaton communicate with the Board of Building Standards to add a section on tree foundations for us. I mean, make our job a little bit easier.
I'm sorry you're breaking up.
Oh, did you see his calculation on the foundation of a tree supporting this load?
I'm relying on the experts.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the board need, or Susie need a break before we call our last case?
No.
Now, if we want to get moving, hopefully we get a couple answers in before Mr. Welsh has to leave, as long as we let the appellant know before we start the case what the situation is.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move forward then. Call case number 19-0151 deals with property located at 112 West Mulberry Street, located in West Union. Do we have the parties present for that? Mr. Purtell and Ms. Campbell?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, very good. And Mr. Eaton, you're here. And I have on our seat, I did see where Aaron Johnston, I see his moniker. What about Joshua Monroe from the Attorney General's office? Is he on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Josh Monroe from the Ohio Attorney General's office.
Okay, well, let's begin with an introduction of the parties, beginning with the appellant. State your full name. Someone's going to need you. State your full name. State your full name. Spell your last name and the capacity by which you're here. We'll ask the respondents to do the same. Those that are witnesses, non-attorneys, will be sworn in, and we'll hear from the parties. Beginning with the appellant. Just enter your appearance, please.
Okay, Stephen W. Purtell, P as in Peter, U-R-T-E-L-L, representing the appellant S&P Enterprises of West Union, LLC. Also present is Paul Brown, the owner of S&P Enterprises, and Mary Jane Campbell, who's listed as the statutory agent, but shouldn't be. But she's letting us use her office, which is right next door to Mr. Brown's business.
Okay, very good. And for the division?
Yes, thank you. Josh Monroe, 0095538 from the Ohio Attorney General's office with Jeff Eaton.
Okay. And is Aaron going to enter his appearance, or is he just going to be a fly on the wall?
I think he's going to be a fly on the wall.
Okay. Now, I've been practicing law 38 and a half years, and I would have to look at my Supreme Court number to read it off. That was impressive. Okay, if we would have the non-lawyers stand, raise your right hand. We'll have Susie administer the oath.
Do each of you swear or affirm the testimony today will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Yes.
I do.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Purtell?
Yes. Initially, Mr. Brown was going to hire an architect and get plans made up. As time went on, he decided that he was just going to tear down the existing structure. Mr. Monroe was very gracious, giving us a couple continuances. However, with COVID and just trying to keep his business afloat, Mr. Brown got behind. He just finished tearing it down recently. I think we submitted a picture of how it looks presently, but it has not been inspected at this point.
Maybe in my rush, because we're up against a little bit of a clock with one of our members, I failed to advise Mr. Purtell and Mr. Monroe that we're a board of 4 rather than a board of 5 today. Any objections in proceeding that in front of us today?
No.
No.
Okay. Okay. Are there questions of Mr. Purtell and/or Mr. Brown by members of the board?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just a quick, looking at this case, just a quick synopsis of what happened. Because the reality of the situation is all the stuff that we're saying about, this being a residence and stuff like that, it doesn't matter because it's a mixed use building. As long as there's a commercial component, it's got to go in front of the Department of Commerce. So I guess I need to so anything that is done to that building, whether it be on the residential portion or not, is subject to the jurisdiction of Department of Commerce. So kind of given that,
But it was grandfathered in.
That's the way that
Hold on, there's background noise. Go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah, so kind of given that as our set, just somebody give me a quick understanding of why we're here, why we're appealing an adjudication order for something that needs to be done.
Yeah, there's several things. My name is Mary Jane Campbell. Again, I'm not an owner. I just eat lunch there occasionally. I never could get you guys to serve me at my home address, even though I requested multiple times, but I will file a complaint later on that matter. Anyway, our whole contention is it was grandfathered in.
Hold on, Miss Campbell, please. You just eat lunch there, and then why are you trying to defend this particular case? You must be associated with the ownership, either of the entity that owns the building, or of the building, or of one of the businesses. That you have to have some type of relationship.
According to you all, the High Secretary of State's office has me as a statutory agent. And I wrote and I corresponded with your office, and you all keep including me. So since you've got this in my name, I'm defending.
Are you not the statutory agent?
No, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a CPA.
You don't have to be. You don't have to be.
Well, Mr. Purtell, you want to clear that up if you know.
Yeah, Ms. Campbell helped Mr. Brown with the paperwork when he filed to be an LLC. The Secretary of State's office listed Ms. Campbell as the statutory agent, even though that was not her intent. She's been trying to get her name removed. She helped Mr. Brown file his answer dated December the 3rd, 2019, before I got involved. They listed me as the attorney, since an attorney is necessary to represent an LLC. So I came into the picture after the answer was filed.
Okay. All right.
So Ms. Campbell does not want to be the statutory agent, but at this time she currently is.
Suppose we could check.
That would be correct.
Okay. She's not been substituted.
Okay, then go ahead, Ms. Campbell. Thank you.
Yes, and so
our whole thing when our understanding was that buildings that are more than 100 years old are grandfathered in. West Union does not have any zoning, and we felt like that was an addition to a private residence. But we tore it down. We tore it off, even though it was his private residence, because you all are threatening to close his door. So we've tore it down. It's off. I mean, we can send you a picture of the front of the building. So even though we didn't agree, we complied. So
when Ms. Campbell, when you use the vernacular "we," who is "we"?
Well, I was out there running my mouth supervising Paul tearing it down last night.
Yeah.
He actually did the work. I was just standing out in the street watching.
Okay.
Ms. Campbell runs her business next door to, or catty corner to Mr. Brown's. They're good friends. They're customers of each other. But it's an informal relationship. She obviously she's not an attorney. She is an accountant, but she's not the accountant for his business. Like I said earlier, she is listed as the statutory agent at this time, but hopefully it won't be much longer once this is settled.
Right. Well, it's pretty easy to substitute or to resign as an agent, I think, at least the last time I checked. But okay, if that at the time being, we've heard from Ms. Campbell. Mr. Monroe, do you have any questions of Ms. Campbell?
I do not at this time.
Mr. Purtell, do you have is Mr. Brown going to testify?
He is, and he has been sworn. Mr. Brown, would you please state your name and address?
My name is Paul Brown, 112 West Mulberry Street, West Union, Ohio, 45693.
And are you the only owner of S&T Enterprises of West Union, LLC? Yeah. Okay. And you operate a Snappies franchise out of the first floor?
Yep.
Okay. And then you live above the business, that's your personal residence?
Yep.
Okay. And you're no longer trying to get the an architect to approve of the addition, is that correct?
Yeah, because state ain't gonna let it go through anyway, so I just done with it.
So you have torn down the addition?
Yeah.
Okay. And nobody from the state has come to inspect at this point, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Monroe?
I don't have any further questions for him.
Okay. Anything further, Mr. Purtell, at this time?
No, just a closing statement. Like I said before, Mr. Monroe's really been good about agreeing to continuances. I think the goal was everything would be torn down, we'd get the thing inspected, and this hearing wasn't necessary, but that wasn't done in time. So I do apologize for us not getting this taken care of sooner. Ms. Campbell was alluding to, it just seems like it was unfair to Mr. Brown. He acted in good faith. He didn't understand that the combination of this being a residence and a commercial business brought him into the brought him under state jurisdiction. And he checked with West Union authorities. Found, they told him that he didn't have to get any permits, and he went upon that. And I think that's why we're here now.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Monroe, on behalf of the division.
Yeah, we believe that this is obviously within the jurisdiction of the Department of Commerce because it's a mixed-use business. Per the testimony of Mr. Brown and Ms. Campbell, this was clearly submitted without a plan approval and therefore is basically in violation of the Ohio Building Code, and that's why the building department issued this order. I'll turn it over to Jeff Eaton if you have anything else to add at this point, Mr. Eaton.
Only thing I would add is our order was a request to submit plans. In no way was that an order to close business or to demolish. It was merely a request to submit the documents for the work that was done. That's all I have. Thank you.
That would be the adjudication, Mr. Eaton?
Correct.
So if we were to uphold the adjudication, it would simply be to submit plans.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Pertel, any questions of Mr. Eaton?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, board members, thoughts, comments, sentiments, and/or questions of any of the parties, board counsel.
I don't have any questions. I think, Mr. Chair, I mean, either the appellant withdraws his request for appeal, or if we're going to vote, my guess would be to vote to uphold the adjudication order.
Which really is 6 one way, half dozen the other, right?
Right.
Chip, thoughts?
I agree. I mean, if the structure's torn down, it's we don't have a picture, we don't have verification, but I mean, I agree with Paul. We either uphold or withdraw the appeal.
And Brad.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, now I still think there is probably some work for the appellant to do. I mean, if they built something and then tore it down, I would assume that they realize that there will be a follow-up state inspection to make sure that there is no damage to the building during the building and or deconstructing.
So it is sort of 6 one way, half dozen the other. Mr. Pertel, do you want us to deliberate and vote, or do you want to withdraw the notice of appeal?
We'll withdraw the appeal, Your Honor.
Okay. That being the case, the matter is adjourned. We appreciate council's candor and participation and the parties. And Chip Welch, it's 12:02.
Yes.
Okay, so you can leave. This case, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, Mr. Pertel. Thank you, Mr. Monroe.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Monroe.
We'll stay, Susie, we'll stay on the record for a minute if we could.
Okay.
Yep, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Do we have a motion to approve minutes? Now, we're a board of 3 right now, but do we have a motion to approve minutes for both October 17th and October 18th of 2020?
Don't move.
Okay, and is there a second, Paul?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes on each of those respective dates, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The minutes for the 17th and 18th stand approved. So the trying to go back here on the docket, the case that was continued that I didn't realize was continued was, which case was that, Susan?
25, Richmond County.
Okay, very good, yes. So case number 20 of today's docket, case number 20-0025, the Legacy on Possum Run, was a late continuance and or withdrawn. The case number 20-0077 has been withdrawn, and a Fayette County matter, case number 20-0042, dealing with the Anchor Baptist Church in Washington Courthouse, was continued for 30 days. Doesn't look like we have any new business to tend to right now. Do we have a motion to approve preparation and compensation for the board members for today's hearing?
Yes, so move.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the members who attended today stand to be compensated for preparation and attendance. Hearing no new business and having concluded today's docket, I would announce under the Sunshine Law that our next meeting will be Monday, September 28th, 2020 at 12:30, and will also be conducted virtually. That agenda is forthcoming. Hearing no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, if we wouldn't mind, I know we've been directed to make sure we have our discussions open forum. there's a case that's being appealed to the courts regarding a school that we had denied a request for variance. Maybe, and this might be just a question to you, just so that we're having our discussions openly. When an appellant that wants to appeal our decision to the courts submits a document called stipulation of fact that is, at least in my opinion, incorrectly describes the occurrence at our hearing, are we supposed to let that just happen, or should we, get involved and say, hold on, the stipulation of fact by the appellant who wants relief from our judgment, it was incorrect in that. I'm just trying to understand the process, and I know, do we even have standing in that thing? But I would think I would think that if a court is going to overrule one of our decisions, it should be based on more than just one side telling their story what happened.
Right. I mean, I think that's a loaded question in a lot of ways, because if the parties, if they're going to trial, for example, and a trial on first impression, and they want to stipulate that the sun rises at 3 a.m., even though everybody knows it doesn't, the parties stipulate, then that becomes a fact that I think becomes part of the case, notwithstanding its accuracy. In this case, though, the nuance is that they are stipulating the facts that that are contained in the record that at least one or more of the board members feel is not an accurate reflection of the record, right?
Correct.
And I do think that Susan was going to have conversations with our Assistant Attorney General that represents the board, and I understand we have transition there. And I think that's a question that we need to ask counsel and try to find out really what our standing is under 119. I mean, we made a decision, and under 119.12, the party adversely affected filed a notice of appeal, and so now it's governed by 119, which generally which means you file in the common pleas court that would have jurisdiction, which is generally where the agency is principally located, or where the property is. In both cases, that would be Franklin County, and so it's in the Franklin County Common Pleas Court, and then the judges. The threshold that the judge has is that if the order is supported by reliable and probative evidence, and is otherwise supported by law, and not contrary to law, in other words, it's not against the law, then the judge has to affirm under the statute. And so we are handcuffed because we're not down there, we haven't filed a friend of the court brief. I don't know exactly what our standing is as the board. It's our order that's being appealed, but it's the parties to that case are the Upper Arlington School Board and the Upper Arlington Building Department, not the Board of Building Appeals. So I wish I could give you an answer. I kind of scratched my head about that.
Yeah.
I think that we have every right to consult board counsel. And we can do that in executive session. I think it's probably can't do that today because we just found out that we have a transition as our counsel here. But I hear you loud and clear, and if we had Chip here, I'd be interested because he's got his license to practice law as well. I'd be curious to hear what he says about that, but I don't have a definitive answer on that. I mean, the other thing is too, you can't really commit a fraud on the court, and so then if you came in and the experts testified that on June 21st, it got light at 5:45 in the morning and it got dark in Central Ohio at 9:20 at night, and the parties went in and stipulated that it got light at 3 a.m. Is that producing a fraud on the court? I don't know, but in any event, that's something I think that Susan Can you follow up with our counsel?
I have been emailing him. He's calling in right now. He has been watching. He just could not enter as a presenter today.
Well, no, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not asking him for him to have considered this or issue an opinion to us.
Oh, I know. He's just being admitted now. I asked him to call in so he could speak. Brian?
Yeah.
Okay. Carl, he's here.
Hey, Brian.
WAAG.
How are you? We're happy to have you as our counsel. We're not going to load up on this, but we had a case where we adjudicated in favor of the building department against the school board in the same suburban city. But the school board and actually the building department actually advocated for the variance rather than having its adjudication upheld. And in any event, the adjudication order for the building department was upheld, and so the school district filed its notice of appeal, but the building department entered into stipulations of fact with the school board that Mr. Began has reviewed and feels as though it may not be an accurate reflection of the record that they were stipulating to. And so the research assignment at some point for you is whether or not, I mean, the parties to the 119 hearing in the Common Pleas Court are the building department and the elementary or in the school district. And the issue is what rights as either amicus friend of the court or do we have any standing as the agency to try to correct what we think would be an inaccurate record based on a stipulation of the parties that may be out of maybe convenience or whatever the case may be. I don't know, and I don't know the answer to that. So, and
okay,
you know, and I don't, and we wouldn't expect you. Are we still in a public hearing, Susan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't expect you to comment for us, but that would be the question that's been brought by our architect member that we do need some counsel on at some point in time.
So that would be, I would think we could do that in an executive session at the next meeting if you want. I could give you my answer on that. I could do a little research on it. I'd be fine with that.
That would be welcome.
Can you tell me what the case number is or anything like that? Do you know offhand?
I'll let Susan get that for you.
I'll get it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get everything from Susan and we'll take care of it that way.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I mean, the question is, you know, hey, I don't mind if a court is going to overrule us, but they overrule us not knowing what happened.
Sure.
You know, is our concern, right?
Right.
Okay. That being the case, then our next hearing is September 28th at 12:30, as I indicated, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, subject to our next meeting, the 28th, we stand adjourned. Susie, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We can sign off now. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, everybody.